So what if the ultimate goal of business, the one objective that we are basically all taught to strive for, is actually a massive trap?
You mean the whole perpetual infinite growth thing?
Exactly. This idea that you just have to keep getting bigger. Think about it for a second. If Oxford University is so incredibly successful, why isn't there a branch in Washington, D.C.
Right.
or Tokyo or Dubai? I mean, they've been around for centuries. They have the brand recognition, so why not scale it up globally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you could actually apply that exact same logic to almost any enduring human, well, outside of the corporate sphere anyway.
What do you mean, like outside of business?
Yeah. Take a symphony, for example.
Yeah.
If a symphony is universally acclaimed when it's performed by an orchestra of, say, 120 musicians.
Which is a pretty big orchestra.
Right. But if it's successful with 120, why wouldn't they just scale it up to 600 musicians?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be terrible.
Exactly. The assumption that bigger is inherently better completely falls apart there. A 600-piece orchestra wouldn't produce better music. It would just produce, a wall of unmanageable noise.
It would be total chaos.
Right. So we intuitively understand this concept of optimal scale when it comes to art or education or even biology, but we completely abandon that logic the absolute second we start talking about business.
We really do. We just assume the default strategy is always, always to grow bigger. But today, we are actively challenging that default setting.
We're going after the sacred cow.
We really are. We are exploring why staying intentionally small, like deliberately resisting the urge to scale, might actually be the absolute smartest, most resilient business strategy you could ever adopt.
Which is totally counterintuitive to everything you learn in business school.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our specific mission for the next little while is to unpack the prologue of Paul Jarvis's groundbreaking concept, Company of One.
And we are going to figure out how to completely redefine success.
Right. So for anyone listening right now, whether you are, running a mature business or maybe navigating a side hustle, or even if you're just operating within a massive corporate hierarchy, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, because we're going to look at the actual mechanics of why blind growth is so often the root cause of systemic failure.
And we'll also be dissecting how questioning that growth impulse can lead to this very specific kind of financial stability and personal autonomy that honestly scale inherently destroys.
Exactly. The whole philosophy here really challenges the premise that you are somehow failing if you aren't constantly expanding your footprint.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way the source material frames this is just incredibly vivid. It starts with this massive, very physical life pivot.
Right, the move.
Yeah. So the date is February 28th, 2010. It's actually the final day of the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. And the author's driving this tiny cube van, leaving behind what he describes as a sleek glass box in the sky.
Right in the heart of downtown Vancouver.
Exactly. He's abandoning this hyper-connected, high-status life. He was a highly sought-after tech consultant for literal giants. We're talking Mercedes-Benz, Microsoft, Marie Forleo.
So he definitely wasn't fleeing failure.
Not at all. He was at the absolute top of his game.
Which I think is what makes the destination of this little cube van so critical to understanding his mindset.
Yeah, tell them where he was going.
He was heading to Tofino, which is a town of fewer than 2,000 people on the extreme western edge of Vancouver Island.
It's a pretty wild place.
It really is. It's famously billed as life on the edge, literally where the road ends at the Pacific Ocean.
Oh.
It's actually where they filmed that survival show, Alone.
Right.
Yeah. And it's notorious for awful internet connectivity, profound physical isolation, and a culture that is basically composed of surfers and people who are deeply content living entirely off the modern grid.
So he wasn't just looking for, a prettier view out his condo window.
No. He was actively fleeing the incessant buzzing of urban existence. And more specifically, he was fleeing the unrelenting external pressure to scale his successful business.
Because there is this pervasive cultural expectation, right, that because a single consultant is billing high rates and has a wait list of premium clients, the only logical next step is
to the commercial office.
Exactly. Lease an office, hire junior consultants, build a firm, and become this agency's CEO.
Because the environment he was operating in strictly equated professional success with physical and operational expansion.
Right.
So to save his sanity and really to protect the core of what made him successful in the first place, he had to physically remove himself from the ecosystem that was demanding that expansion.
But the sudden shift has to be jarring, right? Going from a hyper-stimulated high-growth environment to complete isolation, That forces a pretty serious psychological reckoning.
Oh, absolutely. When you relocate to a cabin in the woods, cut off from reliable internet, devoid of streaming services and constant email pings, you were abruptly left with nothing but yourself.
And let's dig into the mechanics of why that is such a terrifying prospect for the modern professional. Because the text brings up this fascinating University of Virginia study by Timothy Wilson.
Oh, the electric shock study.
Yes, it perfectly illustrates our collective intolerance for our own undivided attention.
It's a wild study.
It is. So the researchers placed participants in an entirely unadorned room with absolutely nothing to do but think for 15 minutes.
Just 15 minutes.
Just 15. They stripped away cell phones, reading material, any external stimuli. The only interactive element in the room was a button, and if you press this button, it would deliver a literal, painful electric shock to your ankle.
And what's crazy about the methodology of that study is that prior to the isolation period, the researchers actually have the participants experience the shock.
Right, just to confirm it was unpleasant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And many participants explicitly stated they would literally pay money not to experience that shock again.
Bet that.
But then, when left alone in a room for just 15 minutes with nothing but their own internal monologue, a staggering percentage of participants, particularly men, actually chose to voluntarily electrocute themselves.
Wait, really? Even after saying they'd pay to avoid it?
Yeah, some of them even pressed the button multiple times.
Oh, that is just, I mean, they preferred physical pain to the discomfort of the void.
It's wild. But it forces us to look at the relentless pursuit of business growth through a much darker lens.
Oh, so.
Well, think about the endless email chains, the quarterly scaling targets, the constant hiring pushes. Are we using those things as a socially acceptable electric shock?
Oh, wow. So we utilize the friction of constant operational motion to distract ourselves from the quiet.
Precisely, to avoid the underlying questions that surface when the noise stops.
Questions like, is this business model actually making me happy?
Or, am I building a life I want or just a machine I have to serve? We use busyness as an anesthetic.
Oh, that's so true.
From a neurochemical standpoint, completing a minor task, answering an email, or, hiring a new employee, it triggers a dopamine loop.
It feels like progress.
Exactly. We invent new, complex problems to solve by scaling up, ensuring our default mode network, which is the part of the brain that engages in deep self-reflection and existential questioning, is never given the quiet space it needs to activate.
So by moving to Tofino and decluttering his physical life, the author inadvertently achieved, inbox zero for his brain.
He stripped away the anesthesia.
And without the anesthesia of societal expectations or the buzzing of the tech world, he was finally able to look at his business mechanics objectively.
Right.
As he sat in that isolation, he realized he had unconsciously been optimizing his life for simplicity, and he had actually been applying that exact same philosophy to his work for 20 years.
Which is the core realization here.
Yeah, the resilience of his business, the autonomy he enjoyed, the high profit margins, they were all a direct result of his deliberate resistance to typical avenues of growth.
He had been operating as a company of one all along.
Actively turning down the opportunity to build an agency precisely to maintain his freedom.
But, making that realization in a cabin in the woods is, it's kind of an isolated philosophical breakthrough.
Sure, it's easy to be a monk on a mountain.
Exactly. But the text immediately grounds this concept in reality by detailing an interaction that illustrates the actual mathematical mechanics of operating this way among other professionals.
Yes, the surfing accountant.
It completely challenges the core economic assumptions we all operate under.
It's such a memorable anecdote. So the setting is a typical August morning in Tofino. The author is out in the lineup, waiting for the swell, sitting on his surfboard next to an accountant friend.
As you do in Tofino.
Right. And completely unprompted, the accountant casually mentions that he is thrilled because he has just about generated enough profit to take the rest of the year off to go rock climbing.
Which, let's pause on that. It is August.
There are still 4 to 5 months left in the fiscal year.
And the author notes that he was so conceptually paralyzed by this statement that he actually missed several waves just trying to process it.
Because it defies all modern business logic. Who stops working in August just because they hit their target?
Right. Traditional business logic dictates that if you hit your annual revenue target in August, you immediately revise the target upward.
You capitalize on the momentum.
You aggressively acquire more clients, and you double your projections for December. Stopping is considered leaving money on the table.
I always look at the traditional business growth model like a biological organism that has somehow lost its regulating mechanism.
How do you mean?
Well, Think of a healthy human cell. It grows, it divides, and then it stops. It knows when it has reached its optimal state.
Okay, yeah.
But blind business growth operates more like a tumor. It is growth for the sake of growth. It consumes massive amounts of resources, expanding uncontrollably without any regard for the health of the host.
And the host, in this case, being the business owner's life, their time, their mental health.
Exactly. It's like buying a bigger house. You think you'll be happier, but now you have to buy more furniture to fill the rooms, pay higher taxes, and spend your entire weekend cleaning it.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the accountant's methodology represents the healthy cell. He isn't operating on vague ambitions of just having more.
He is operating on the radical mathematics of enough.
Yes, he sat down and constructed a highly specific financial model. He mathematically calculated exactly what he needed in profit.
Which means looking at his exact fixed living costs.
His variable lifestyle costs, factoring in a margin for inflation and taxes, and determining a comfortable specific sum for long-term investments.
And that calculation resulted in a hard, immutable number.
His enough number. And once the business generated that exact amount of profit, the business had fulfilled its entire purpose for the year.
So let's look at what happens if that accountant decides to adopt the tumor model of growth, the hedonic treadmill.
Okay.
Say he looks at a successful August and thinks, you know what, I should open a second office in Victoria.
To do that, he has to sign a 5-year commercial lease.
Right. He hires 3 junior accountants and an office manager. He upgrades his enterprise software licenses.
And what happens to his enough number?
It instantly skyrockets.
It fundamentally transforms from a lifestyle enabler into a relentless master.
Yeah.
His baseline overhead has just gone through the roof.
He is no longer just working to fund his rock climbing and living expenses.
No, he is now burdened with generating enough top-line revenue to cover a massive payroll, commercial rent, corporate insurance, and management overhead.
So the margin of time he'd successfully engineered for himself instantly vanishes.
You won't be surfing in August anymore.
No, he will be trapped in a boardroom in October, stressing over whether the Victoria office will hit its Q4 utilization metrics just to break even.
By pursuing scale, his actual quality of life plummets because his new overhead completely devours his gains.
So the crucial pivot here, the fundamental mind shift, is moving away from optimizing for volume and instead optimizing for value.
The focus must shift from being bigger to being better.
Right. If the accountant focuses on being better rather than bigger, he might refine his expertise, target a more premium tier of clients, and raise his rates.
So he hits his same enough number with fewer clients, working fewer hours, while maintaining near zero overhead.
It's brilliant, but this requires a profound shift in how you evaluate your own metrics.
Which brings us to the listener. You have to actively ask yourself, do you possess a concrete, mathematically defined enough number?
Or are you running on a hedonic treadmill, chasing an abstract moving finish line called more?
Because if the goal is simply to grow, you will never actually arrive.
Yeah.
The target inherently recedes the faster you run toward it.
And this brings up a really critical friction point in the source material. Because the universal assumption in the corporate world is that if you have a problem, the solution is to throw more at it.
More capital, more personnel, more software.
Right. But the text argues that blind growth growing without a strategic, structural necessity is actually the primary catalyst for business failure.
It's a really dangerous assumption that hard work and smart thinking must always result in business growth.
Exactly. Not all growth is beneficial. In fact, blind growth often reduces resilience and autonomy.
Research strongly suggests that blind growth is actually the main cause of business problems. It bloats operating costs, making the company incredibly fragile to minor market fluctuations.
Fragility is the perfect word for it.
It's a well-documented phenomenon. When a company arbitrarily scales its headcount during a strong quarter, it locks in permanent fixed costs based on temporary variable revenue.
And the moment the market dips,
that bloated infrastructure becomes an anchor. They are forced into massive disruptive layoffs, destroying morale and institutional knowledge, all because they confused a temporary surge in demand with a mandate to permanently increase their footprint.
Okay, I see the appeal of staying small and maintaining low overhead to protect profit margins, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
What happens when a competitor with massive venture capital funding enters your space? They can afford to operate at a loss for years just to acquire market share.
Right.
They can price gouge, they can outspend you on marketing, they offer 247 customer support. Doesn't staying intentionally small make you incredibly vulnerable to being crushed by a well-funded behemoth?
It's a completely valid concern,
Yeah.
but it misinterprets where the vulnerability actually lies.
Okay, explain that.
A massive VC-funded competitor operates like a cargo ship. It has immense momentum, but it takes miles to change direction.
Right, they're slow.
Exactly. A company of one, on the other hand, operates like a speedboat.
Yeah.
Agility is your defense mechanism. Because your overhead is minimal, your profit margins are vastly superior.
So you don't need thousands of customers to remain highly profitable.
You only need a dedicated handful.
Yeah.
When the massive competitor slashes prices, they are burning gas and increasing their own burn rate.
So you just don't compete on price.
You compete on proximity, hyper-specialization, and agility. You can pivot your entire business model over a weekend to serve a micro-niche that the cargo ship is too massive to even notice.
I love that. Outmaneuver them by refusing to fight on their terms. But let's look at the operational mechanics of solving problems without scaling, using specific examples from the material.
The more reflex versus the better strategy.
Yeah. Like, if my product takes off and I am suddenly drowning in hundreds of customer support emails every day, the traditional reflex is that I must build a support department.
Right, you think, I have more customers, I need more employees.
Exactly. I have to hire representatives, implement a complex ticketing system, build a management hierarchy to oversee them.
But that is the exact reflex the Company of One framework dismantles. Because in that scenario, you are treating the symptom, which is the volume of emails, rather than the disease.
So instead of adding human capital to manage the friction,
You engineer the friction out of the system. Instead of building a massive support team to handle questions, what if you build a better way to teach customers how to use your product so they don't have to ask questions in the first place?
oh wow.
You conduct a rigorous audit of the user interface. You utilize heat mapping to see exactly where users are getting confused.
You rewrite the onboarding sequence.
Exactly. You create comprehensive, intuitive documentation or contextual video tutorials within the app itself. You solve the root cause of the confusion so the support ticket is never generated.
So you are scaling your efficiency, not your payroll.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You're finding a way to spend less to increase your profit margin.
Decreasing overhead instead of increasing top-line revenue. It's so counterintuitive to modern business education.
It really is.
If I need more profit, my first instinct is to spend more on marketing to acquire more customers. But if I simply analyze my tech stack, eliminate redundant software subscriptions, and renegotiate my payment processing fees,
You instantly increase your profit margin without having to acquire a single new user or spend an additional dollar on ads.
it's about growing smaller and smarter.
Because staying small is not a stepping stone to something else. And it's definitely not the result of a business failure.
It is a highly intelligent, intentional end goal.
It creates a dual buffer, a robust profit buffer for the company to weather economic markets, and a personal buffer to help you, the owner, thrive in times of hardship without the crushing weight of massive payrolls.
That level of freedom and resilience sounds incredibly appealing, but I want to clarify a really common misconception here. Because I know for a fact that skeptics are listening to this right now, rolling their
I
eyes.
think this isn't revolutionary.
Exactly, thinking you've just spent half an hour describing a freelancer who doesn't want to hire anyone.
Right. Is a company of one just a fancy term for a freelancer?
We need to elevate this and clarify the massive mechanical difference between the standard gig economy model and the actual architecture of a company of one.
Conflating the two is definitely the most common misunderstanding of this philosophy. And it really stems from a failure to understand macroeconomic fragility.
Because a freelancer operates on a strictly linear time-for-money exchange model.
Exactly. It is a one-to-one relationship. Whether you are a graphic designer, a consultant, or an hourly contractor, your revenue is inextricably tethered to your active physical output.
If a freelancer stops working, they stop getting paid.
The fatal flaw in that architecture is that it lacks any mechanism for scale or passive continuity.
I like to relate freelancing to carrying buckets of water from a river to a village.
That's a perfect analogy.
You get paid a specific sum for every bucket you carry. It is a highly respectable way to earn a living, but the risk profile is terrifying.
Because if you twist your ankle,
Or get sick, or simply want to take August off to go rock climbing like our accountant friend, The village goes thirsty and your revenue drops to absolute zero instantaneously.
You are trapped by the physical limits of your own biology and the hours in a day.
But a company of one is about building a plumbing system.
Yes, it aligns much more with the traditional definition of an entrepreneur. It is entirely focused on the engineering and maintenance of the plumbing system.
Utilizing systems, automations, and processes to build a long-term business.
The objective is to operate and profit outside of the time spent working, to build an asset that facilitates value exchange asynchronously.
Meaning the transaction and the consumption of the value occur entirely independent of your presence.
Exactly.
So let's break down the mechanics of how a service-based professional actually executes that pivot. Say you are that high-end tech consultant we talked about earlier, billing high hourly rates. You are currently carrying buckets.
Right.
How do you productize?
Well, you extract the underlying intellectual property from your service. You take the specific, repeatable framework you use to solve problems for your clients, and you package it into a scalable format.
Like what? What are some specific examples from the text?
It could mean developing a software-as-a-service application, a SaaS product, that automates the framework. It could mean creating physical products, selling software, or teaching online courses.
Right, an asynchronous, cohort-based online course.
Exactly. Or designing a physical product that can be manufactured and fulfilled by a third-party logistics center.
The profound takeaway here is the upfront time investment versus the infinite scalability of the output.
Developing the product takes time. Laying the pipes takes immense effort. Writing the code, filming the curriculum, engineering the prototype, that is labor-intensive.
But once the plumbing is laid, once it's done, the number of customers can be almost infinite.
The marginal cost of delivering that value to one additional customer or 10,000 additional customers is practically zero.
The profit happens outside of time spent.
Customers can purchase and consume these things 24/7. A digital product or a SaaS application can be purchased by a user in Tokyo at 3:00 a.m. your time while you are fast asleep.
And scaling those customers does not require scaling employees exponentially.
Your overhead barely registers a blip whether you sell 10 units or 10,000.
It's a massive paradigm shift, and I think it's important to emphasize that this mindset is for everyone. It extends far beyond solo tech founders hacking away in a garage.
Oh, absolutely. The company of one is a collective mindset applicable to anyone, from a small business owner to a corporate leader.
If you are an executive or a middle manager within a massive Fortune 500 company, adopting this mindset makes you an incredibly formidable entrepreneur.
It's a blueprint for taking radical ownership of your vertical, aggressively hunting for operational efficiencies, automating redundant tasks within your department.
Optimizing your team for maximum value output rather than just expanding your headcount to build like a political fiefdom in the office.
You become an indispensable, valuable asset because you generate outsized results with minimal organizational friction. It's a lean, agile approach to work that survives any economic climate.
So when you synthesize all of these mechanics, the psychology of isolation, the rigorous mathematics of the enough number, the deliberate resistance to blind growth, and the shift from time for money to scalable systems, you arrive at a remarkably elegant operational philosophy.
You really do. And the author draws a fantastic parallel here to Michael Pollan to tie all these key ideas together.
The food guy.
Yeah. So Michael Pollan famously distilled decades of incredibly complex nutritional science and conflicting dietary ideology into just 7 words.
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Exactly. It's so simple but so profound. And in that same vein, the author distills the entire company of one philosophy into a similarly elegant 3-part framework.
Which is start small, define growth, and keep learning.
Those 3 steps are the ultimate diagnostic tool for modern business.
Let's break those down. Start small. That demands that you launch with the absolute minimum viable infrastructure.
Right. And define growth forces you to mathematically calculate your enough number. It makes you ruthlessly interrogate any opportunity to scale, demanding proof that it will make the business better, not just bigger.
And keep learning is the commitment to constant refinement and efficiency, ensuring your systems remain sharp and agile.
That simple framework is the shortcut to understanding true entrepreneurial resilience.
The ultimate shortcut to being well-informed about modern business isn't learning how to scale infinitely or build a massive empire that consumes every waking hour of your life.
No, it's learning how to question growth, define your enough, and architect a hyper-efficient system that exists solely to support the exact life you want to live.
It's about ensuring the business works for your life, rather than a life that is consumed by your work.
Ensuring the business remains your tool, rather than you becoming a resource that the business consumes.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We live in an ecosystem heavily polluted by hustle culture, LinkedIn humble brags, and the persistent terror of our projects failing.
The fear of failure is huge.
But I want to leave you with a final, rather provocative thought to reflect on. We are so conditioned to fear the collapse of our businesses, but what if failure isn't the worst-case scenario?
What could be worse than failing?
What if the absolute real danger, the most dangerous thing that could happen to you, is actually succeeding wildly at a business model you secretly hate?
Oh, wow. Building a massive, bloated organization that you are terrified of running but can never step away from because it requires constant feeding.
Exactly. So take a hard, objective look at your current goals. Look at what you've set for this quarter or this year. Are you carefully engineering a life that you actually want to live? A life that brings you peace and autonomy?
Or are you just blindly constructing a beast that will demand more of your time, more of your energy, and more of your sanity with every passing day?
Are you building a life or a beast you'll have to constantly feed?
It's a heavy question. But understanding the deep philosophy of why staying small is the ultimate tactical advantage is only the first half of the equation.
Right. The necessary next step is operational execution. How do you actually implement the traits required to survive this way?
How do you develop the specific psychological and tactical traits required to thrive without the safety net of a massive corporate apparatus?
Well, in our next deep dive, we are going to explore the specific characteristics every company of one needs to thrive.
Including a fascinating look at why embracing a specific brand of dark humor might actually just be the secret weapon to your long-term business resilience.
Dark humor as a defense mechanism. You definitely won't want to miss it.
So what if the ultimate business success story isn't actually about becoming the next, billion-dollar unicorn? What if it's about purposefully and strategically staying as small as possible?
That's a premise that just creates instant tension right out of the gate, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because literally every single piece of traditional business culture we absorb, it preaches the exact opposite. We are told relentlessly from the very first day of our first jobs that if you aren't growing, you're dying.
Right. You either scale up or you just get completely crushed by the competition.
Exactly. But the source material we are diving into today, it completely shatters that assumption. It takes that deeply ingrained corporate dogma and just turns it entirely on its head.
And that is exactly what we are here to do. So in this deep dive, we're exploring the foundational concepts of Paul Jarvis's work,
Yeah.
specifically focusing on Chapter 2, which is all about defining what a company of one actually is. We're going to look at why blind, endless expansion might actually be the most dangerous thing you can do for your business or even your career. And we'll unpack what the far more resilient, autonomous alternative looks like.
And I think the stakes here are incredibly high for you, the listener, because it doesn't actually matter whether you are a solo freelancer trying to figure out your next move, or maybe a small business owner feeling totally overwhelmed.
Or even an employee buried deep inside a massive multinational corporation, right?
Exactly, yes. The principles in this deep dive are designed to teach you how to optimize your career and fundamentally your whole life for autonomy, for resilience, and for personal freedom, rather than just sacrificing all of those things at the altar of endless growth.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Because to really understand the alternative, we have to dissect this myth of perpetual growth first. The core premise of the text is that, well, to grow bigger is simply not an effective business strategy in and of itself. And to illustrate this, the author pulls this brilliant, completely counterintuitive quote from Ricardo Semler. He's the CEO of Semco Partners. And I just love this so much.
It's a great quote.
He says, if Oxford University is so successful, then why isn't there a branch in Washington, D.C.?
It's such a brilliant provocation because it immediately exposes the flaw in our modern business logic. Think about it. If a symphony is successful and it sounds beautiful with, let's say, 120 musicians, why not scale it up to 600 musicians?
Right, because a 600-piece symphony would sound terrible.
Yeah.
It would just be this chaotic wall of noise.
Yeah.
The coordination would be literally impossible.
Exactly. We immediately recognize that in art or in music Or in education, like the Oxford example, there is an optimal size. The actual quality of the thing is tied to its constraints.
Yeah.
But in business, we suffer from this kind of collective delusion that growth should just be infinite. We've confused biological growth with corporate growth.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction. Say more about that.
Well, biological growth naturally reaches a mature state and then it stops, right? A tree grows until it is fully mature, and then it shifts its energy entirely toward health, maintenance, and bearing fruit. It doesn't just keep growing endlessly into the stratosphere until it collapses under its own weight.
That makes total sense.
But blind corporate growth, on the other hand, it operates more like a malignancy. It endlessly expands, it just consumes and consumes resources until it ultimately destroys its host.
Wow. That is a stark, almost terrifying way to look at it. But I mean, you can't argue with it. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And the text actually provides this incredible real-world illustration of what it looks like to find that mature state, to actually define the concept of enough.
Yeah, the Tofino story.
Yes. The author talks about moving to this tiny, super remote town called Tofino on Vancouver Island. It's basically the edge of nowhere. And he meets an accountant there who has this completely radical approach to his work. I really want to hear your take on this guy.
Ah, right, the surfing accountant. It's just such a perfect distillation of this whole idea. So it's August, and the author is out in the water waiting for a wave. And this accountant paddles up next to him and casually mentions that he is thrilled because he has just about made enough money to take the rest of the year off.
Wait, in August?
In August, he's
Yeah.
taking the rest of the year off to go rock climbing and surfing because he had sat down, looked at his life, and meticulously calculated his exact cost of living, plus, a healthy, responsible amount to put away for investments and retirement.
Right.
So he determined his precise enough number. And once he hits that number, which is usually by late summer, he simply stops taking on work. He's done.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because the traditional business brain is just screaming right now.
I know.
Like, isn't growth just a natural byproduct of doing good work? I mean, if this accountant is great at what he does, and he clearly is, if he's hitting his annual target in 8 months, he's going to get more referrals. People will be begging to work with him. Why actively turn them away? Why resist taking on more clients and just, I don't know, doubling his income?
Because he actually understands the hidden, cascading costs of scaling. And this is the mechanical reality of growth that most people just completely ignore. So let's trace it out.
Okay.
If he takes those extra 10 clients, well, suddenly he has too much paperwork for one person to handle. So he has to hire an administrative assistant.
Makes sense.
But now his little home office isn't big enough for 2 people. So he has to go out and sign a commercial lease for a larger office space.
All right.
And now he has to manage that assistant. He has to handle their payroll, pay for their health care, deal with HR compliance, buy them a computer.
So his overhead just skyrocketed, like massively.
Yeah, exactly. Suddenly, his baseline expenses are way, way higher, which means his quote-unquote enough number just doubled simply to cover the new infrastructure he built.
Wow.
So now he actually has to take on 20 more clients just to break even on the expansion. He has invited the beast of exponential growth right into his life.
That's a great way to put it. The beast.
Yeah, and by resisting that growth, his focus remains entirely on being better for his current clients, not bigger. He maintains his autonomy, his profit margins stay incredibly high because his overhead is basically zero, and the payoff is that he gets to spend half the year rock climbing.
And, if you're listening to this right now thinking, well, that's just a quaint lifestyle choice for a guy living in the woods, the data actually backs up the danger of the beast on a massive global scale.
It really does.
The text introduces data from the Startup Genome Project, which analyzed over 3,200 high-growth tech startups. And the findings are genuinely shocking. 74% of those high-growth startups fail.
74%.
Yeah. But here is the kicker. They don't fail because they have bad ideas. And they don't fail because the competition beats them. They fail because they scale up too quickly.
Premature scaling. It is literally the leading cause of death for startups. Let's break down exactly why that happens because it's so crucial to understand the actual mechanics of this failure.
Please do.
So, the dominant Silicon Valley model is to secure massive venture capital funding, right? Millions of dollars right out of the gate. And the mandate from those investors is purely exponential user acquisition. It's always grow at all costs. We will figure out how to make money later.
Right. The classic build a rocket ship while you're falling off a cliff mentality.
Precisely. So what does that company do with the money? They build massive server infrastructure, they hire a huge sales team, they rent some gleaming, gorgeous office in San Francisco, and they burn through millions of dollars in cash every single month in anticipation of future revenue.
Right.
But what happens if the market shifts? What happens if it turns out customers only want to pay $10 a month instead of $50? They can't pivot. Because they have a massive payroll to meet, their burn rate is too high.
Exactly. They have built the infrastructure of a giant legacy corporation before they have even proven their core business model. So they just bleed out and die.
It's tragic, really.
It is. So for you listening, I really want you to actively think about what your personal enough number or state looks like. Whether you run your own business or maybe you are climbing the corporate ladder. How much of your current stress is just the result of chasing a constantly moving goalpost?
Yeah.
Are you scaling your lifestyle or your workload just because you feel like you're supposed to?
That is such a crucial question to sit with. And honestly, it serves as the perfect pivot point for our discussion today.
Right.
Because now that we've aggressively challenged the dogma of growth, we need to precisely define the alternative. Like, what exactly is a company of one?
Right. Let's get into the definition.
Because Chapter 2 makes it abundantly clear that it is not just a fancy, rebranded synonym for freelancing. That is a fundamental distinction. And honestly, if we get this wrong, the entire rest of the framework just falls apart. A company of one is defined simply as a business that actively questions growth. It is not inherently anti-growth. And it is certainly not anti-revenue. You can make millions of dollars as a company of one, but it fiercely resists adding more employees, more overhead, more managerial complexity if there is a smarter, more efficient way forward.
Okay, so help me understand the mechanical difference here. How is that functionally different from just being a highly paid, very successful freelancer?
It comes down to the underlying economic engine. A freelancer fundamentally trades time for money. It is a strict one-to-one relationship.
Right.
If a freelance graphic designer is sitting at their computer designing a logo, they are getting paid. But if that freelancer gets the flu or, wants to take a 2-week vacation to Italy, their income drops to exactly zero.
Because they aren't physically doing the work.
Exactly. They are the ultimate bottleneck of their own earning potential. A company of one, however, utilizes systems, automation, and scalable processes to build long-term value. They profit outside of the time they spend actively working, so it shifts from a one-to-one relationship to a one-to-many relationship.
Okay, so they might build a piece of software or record a comprehensive online training course or design a physical product line. The work is done once, but the transaction can happen 1,000 times without requiring their direct real-time involvement.
Exactly, that's it, perfectly. And the text brings in the story of Tom Fishburne to really ground this concept. He is known online as the marketunist.
Oh, I've seen this stuff.
Yeah, he's great. His background is fascinating, though. He was a VP of marketing at a massive consumer foods company. I mean, he had the Harvard MBA, the corner office, the entire traditional corporate trajectory locked down. But his real passion was actually drawing cartoons about the absurdities of marketing in corporate life.
So he slowly builds up this cartooning side hustle, right? He built a runway. And eventually, he makes the leap. He quits his incredibly lucrative executive job to draw cartoons full-time.
Yep.
And the kicker is, today, he makes 2 to 3 times his corporate executive income.
It's wild.
But wait, let me pause here. If he is taking on these massive corporate clients to draw for their campaigns, how is he not just a freelancer, trading time for money? Doesn't he eventually just run out of hours in the day to draw?
He would if he operated like a traditional agency, but he doesn't. If Tom followed the standard growth playbook, the moment he got too many client requests, he would have rented an office and hired 5 junior illustrators.
Naturally, that's what you do.
Right. And then he would need an account manager to handle all those clients and a bookkeeper. Within a year, Tom wouldn't actually be drawing cartoons anymore. He would be managing people who draw cartoons. He would be doing performance reviews and dealing with office politics.
Oh, wow. He'd be right back in the corporate world he tried to escape in the first place.
Precisely. So instead, he operates as a true company of one. His company is literally just him and his wife working out of a sunny backyard studio in California. Their daughters actually sit and draw alongside them while they work.
That sounds idyllic.
It is. And he scales his income not by scaling his headcount, but by scaling his product. He licenses his existing archive of cartoons to massive companies. He gives highly paid keynote speeches where he presents his work to thousands of people at once.
Ah, one to many.
Exactly. And when he does get a massive, complex project that requires extra hands, he brings on highly specialized freelancers just for that isolated job. When the project is over, the team disbands. There is absolutely no permanent overhead.
I love trying to visualize this. It's almost like being a master chef.
Okay, how so?
Think about it. A freelancer is like a private chef. They cook every single meal themselves. If they aren't physically in the kitchen chopping onions, no one eats and they don't get a paycheck.
Right. Perfect one-to-one.
Now, a traditional corporate CEO, on the other hand, takes a different route. They build a chain of 500 restaurants. They make a massive amount of money, sure, but they spend all their waking hours looking at spreadsheets, managing regional directors, fixing supply chain issues. They never actually touch a pan or cook a meal ever again.
Yeah, they're entirely removed from the craft.
But a company of one. They figure out how to bottle their absolute best secret sauce. They can still cook in their own kitchen every night for the sheer joy and art of it. But that bottled sauce is sitting on thousands of supermarket shelves, ringing up at registers and making them money while they sleep.
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic difference between those three models. I love that. A traditional business solves problems by throwing sheer mass at them, either bodies or dollars. Need more revenue? Hire a bigger sales team. Have too many customer support complaints. Build a massive call center in another country. A company of one looks at those exact same problems and asks, how can I solve this with efficiency and systems? They might solve that customer support issue by spending a week creating incredibly clear, intuitive onboarding videos so the customers never get confused in the first place.
Yeah, they eliminate the problem at the root.
Exactly, rather than hiring 10 people to deal with the symptom. So I would ask you, the listener, to honestly identify where you currently sit on this spectrum in your own career. Are you currently trading your raw hours for dollars? Are you drowning in the management of too many people? Or are you successfully scaling systems that work for you?
But let's pause here because I know exactly what some people are thinking right now.
What's that?
You might be listening to this on your commute thinking, look, this is a beautiful concept if I have a sunny backyard studio in California, but I work for a massive insurance company. I work for a megacorp with 10,000 employees. This doesn't apply to me at all. But the beauty of this text is how universally these principles apply. Because the reality is, whether you have an LLC or a W-2, everyone is essentially a company of one. You are the only person who's truly 100% looking out for your own career trajectory. And inside these massive organizations, the text points out that we have these brilliant individuals called entrepreneurs.
Yes. Entrepreneurship is a fascinating concept. An entrepreneur is effectively a company of one operating within the protective walls and the resources of a larger organization.
Like a startup inside a giant company.
Precisely. These are corporate employees who operate with such high competence that they are given full autonomy to innovate without the friction of micromanagement. They deeply understand the company's macro goals, they intimately know their own unique talents, and they just get to work. They are self-directed, they don't need a manager checking their timesheet or guiding their every move.
And when you look at the track record of these hidden corporate mavericks, it is absolutely staggering. I mean, the text brings up Dave Myers.
Oh, the guitar strings.
Yes. He worked as an engineer for W.L. Gore, the company famous for Gore-Tex fabric, right? And the company had a policy that gave him what they call dabble time to just experiment with company resources.
Which is amazing in itself.
It is. So he takes the specialized coating they use for outdoor gear and, just out of pure curiosity, figures out how to apply it to guitar strings.
Wow.
The result of that dabbling, Elixir strings, which completely revolutionized the music industry and became the best-selling acoustic guitar string brand on the entire market.
Or consider the classic story of Dr. Spencer Silver at 3M. He was tasked with creating a super strong adhesive for the aerospace industry, but he failed. He accidentally created a very weak adhesive that would stick to surfaces, but could be peeled off without leaving any residue.
A terrible aerospace adhesive.
The worst. If he was in a rigid, micromanaged environment, his boss would have deemed it a failure, thrown it in the trash, and told him to get back to the aerospace project immediately. But because he had the autonomy to explore the applications of his quote-unquote failure, he championed it within the company.
And what did it become?
It eventually became the Post-it note, one of the most ubiquitous office products in human history.
Unbelievable.
And even in the modern tech world, look at Facebook. The iconic like button wasn't the result of a multi-year corporate mandate overseen by dozens of steering committees. It was actually created by a small group of entrepreneurs during a multi-day hackathon.
Which just proves that the biggest, most profitable innovations rarely come from bureaucratic bloat. They come from highly autonomous individuals given the space to tinker. But, okay, here's my question.
Yeah.
Why would a massive, rigid corporation actually allow this?
Yeah.
If I'm the CEO of a 5,000-person company, giving people unstructured dabble time sounds like a recipe for absolute chaos and wasted payroll.
It sounds like chaos until you look at the data. The text cites this really fascinating study by Vijay Govindarajan at Dartmouth. He found that out of a random sample of 5,000 corporate employees, you will naturally have about 250 true innovators, people with genuinely great ideas. But only about 25 of them will actually be brilliant entrepreneurs capable of executing those ideas within the complex corporate structure. True companies of one.
Wait, 25 out of 5,000? That is an incredibly rare asset.
Exactly. They are the golden geese. And smart companies realize this. This is why companies like Google famously implemented their 20% time, where engineers could spend 1 day a week working on whatever passion project they wanted, as long as it loosely benefited Google in the long run.
Right.
It's why progressive environments adopt ROW, results-only work environments, where there are literally no set working hours, no mandatory office days, and all meetings are totally optional.
Sounds like a dream.
It does, but you are judged entirely on the work you produce, not the hours you sit at a desk.
But let's be real for a second. If you work at a slow-moving traditional company, your boss isn't going to just let you ignore your inbox and skip meetings starting tomorrow just so you can quote-unquote innovate.
Right. No.
So how does the listener practically start doing this without just getting fired?
It's a great point. You can't just declare yourself an entrepreneur on a Tuesday and stop answering your emails. These massive companies allow this unstructured freedom because they have realized a fundamental truth about top-tier talent.
Which is?
If you stifle freethinkers with red tape, endless status updates, and micromanagement, they won't just complain. They will leave. They will go work for your competitor, or they will start their own firm. These individuals aren't motivated solely by a year-end bonus. They are motivated by autonomy, mastery, and the ability to reinvent their roles.
So it's a retention strategy.
Exactly. So if you are listening to this in a traditional job right now, the practical takeaway is this. You earn autonomy through undeniable leverage. You must first become so highly efficient, so hyper-competent at your core job that your boss completely stops worrying about you.
You become invisible in a good way.
Yes. Once you consistently deliver flawless results with zero hand-holding, you earn the capital to start carving out your own domain. You ask for 1 afternoon a week to work on a specialized project, you prove its value, then you ask for more. You build your company of one from the inside out.
That is incredibly actionable. But surviving that corporate environment, or surviving the absolute chaos of starting your own business, it requires a very specific psychological toolkit. You can't just adopt the title company of one and expect smooth sailing.
Not at all.
The text transitions into outlining 4 core traits that are absolutely non-negotiable if you're going to operate with this level of independence. And the very first one is resilience.
And we need to be very clear about what resilience actually means in this specific context.
Yeah.
It is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's elasticity.
Elasticity, I like that.
And what is crucial here, as noted by Dean Becker of Adaptive Learning Systems in the book, is that resilience is not an innate genetic gift. It's not something you are simply born with or without. It is a highly learnable skill.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Very. And Becker's research demonstrates something profound. Your level of resilience determines your success in business far more than your Ivy League education, your corporate training, or your years of experience.
The text actually shares the story of Danielle Laporte to illustrate this. And her story is a wild, terrifying roller coaster. Today, she is this highly successful, personality-driven author and entrepreneur with a massive following. But early in her career, she fell directly into the trap we talked about earlier. She believed she needed exponential growth.
Right.
So she took $400,000 in venture capital funding to scale her media company.
Which is the dream for a lot of founders, right? You get the big check.
Exactly.
But she quickly learned the brutal mechanics of venture capital. When a VC firm gives you nearly $500,000, they don't do it because they like your vibe. They do it because their fund structure requires a 10x or even 100x return on their investment within a 5 to 7 year window. And to ensure that hypergrowth, they take board seats. They take control.
And that control came with a massive string attached. The investors looked at Danielle and decided she wasn't corporate enough to scale the company. So they forced her to hire a wunderkind CEO, some hotshot executive, to run her own company.
Ouch.
And within 6 months, that new CEO and the investors decided she was actually getting in the way of their growth strategy.
Yeah.
So they sidelined her. They literally fired her from her own personality-driven brand.
It is an absolutely devastating scenario. I mean, imagine building something with your own name on it and then being legally locked out of the building. Most people would just crumble. They would walk away from entrepreneurship forever.
Yeah, I think I would.
But this is exactly where resilience kicks in. She took the time she needed to process the shock and the grief of losing her company. And then she bounced back. She built a brand new website from scratch, started consulting, and wrote a best-selling book. And the profound, hard-won lesson she took away from that trauma was that the strings attached to other people's money are often those other people's opinions. By giving up equity for the sake of forced, unnatural growth, she completely lost control of her own life's work.
It's a brutal lesson to learn. So how do we actually build that kind of resilience? If it's a learnable skill, what are the actual mechanics of learning it?
Well, Dean Becker outlines 3 specific characteristics of highly resilient people. The first is an absolute, unflinching acceptance of reality.
Okay, acceptance. And the texts have this really striking anecdote to explain this. The author's wife is a firefighter and first responder.
Whoa.
She and her crew are routinely exposed to the absolute worst days of people's lives: severe trauma, fires, fatal accidents. And to cope with that immense psychological weight, they use very, very dark humor.
And what's fascinating is that the fire chief actively encourages it. They aren't doing it to make light of the tragedy or to be disrespectful. They are doing it to inject a sliver of light into an overwhelmingly dark situation. It is a psychological survival mechanism. It allows them to accept a horrific, harsh reality without being emotionally destroyed by it. Now, translate that to business.
Okay.
If you spend your energy wishing reality were different, wishing the economy was better, wishing your boss was nicer, wishing your competitors played fair, you are bleeding the exact energy you need to actually deal with the situation. Resilient people don't live in a fantasy world of how things should be. They look at the board, accept the pieces exactly as they are, and make their next move.
That makes a lot of sense. And that leads right into the second characteristic, which is having a deep sense of purpose. You have to be motivated by meaning, not just money.
Crucial.
Because when things get incredibly stressful, when you lose a major client or your product launch completely fails, if you were only in it for the cash, it's entirely rational to just quit. But knowing that your work connects to a larger, meaningful goal, that provides the stamina to push through the misery.
Exactly. And the third characteristic of resilient people is the ability to adapt. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the text zooms out and brings up the looming existential threat of automation.
So boy, here we go.
We aren't just adapting to market trends anymore. We are adapting to a world where McDonald's is actively testing robotic fry cooks that can flip a burger in 10 seconds without ever taking a break.
Which is wild.
Tesla is building self-driving big rigs that will disrupt global logistics. IBM's Watson is diagnosing complex diseases faster than human doctors.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people. It begs the question, if robots and highly advanced algorithms are taking over the doing jobs, the predictable, repetitive, data-heavy task, what on earth is left for the humans? How does a company of one survive that?
The text provides a very clear, very empowering answer to that fear. Creative problem solving. Notice I didn't just say creativity. I said creative problem solving without throwing more at the problem.
Okay, unpack that.
Automation is brilliant at scale and repetition, but it fundamentally struggles with nuance, with human empathy, and with highly constrained creative pivots. A machine cannot read the subtle emotional cues of a frustrated client and completely redesign a strategy on the fly.
Right.
A company of one thrives exactly in the messy, nuanced spaces where machines fail. So to build your own resilience, you must cultivate the habit of accepting reality as it is, anchoring your daily work in a deeper purpose, and constantly adapting your skill set toward high-level creative problem solving rather than just routine task execution.
Okay, so resilience keeps you in the game when you get knocked down. You survive the storm, but surviving isn't enough. Once you bounce back, you have to ensure you're actually the one holding the steering wheel.
Yes.
And that brings us to the second trait, autonomy and control. But the text issues a major flashing warning sign here. It says, you cannot achieve autonomy without first achieving mastery.
And this is a very harsh truth for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and young professionals to swallow. I mean, we live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, right? Where people want the ultimate freedom to set their own hours, work from a beach in Bali, and choose their own projects from day one.
Yeah, the digital nomad dream.
Exactly. But the author argues that true autonomy is a reward for extreme competence. It is earned, not given. Think about it. If you demand complete control over your work, but you possess no highly developed, rare skill set, you aren't going to build a company of one. You are just going to steer your career straight off a cliff.
The text actually has a name for the phase you have to go through before you become a company of one. It calls it the sponge mindset.
The sponge.
Yeah, you have to be willing to spend years absorbing, learning the rules of your industry, and deeply understand the landscape before you ever earn the right to break those rules.
Precisely. Let's look at the example of Caitlin Maud, a digital strategist featured in the book. She is the epitome of the successful company of one today. But she didn't just graduate from college, print some business cards, and declare herself an autonomous, high-paid consultant.
No.
She spent 5 grueling years grinding at a traditional marketing agency. She spent half a decade deeply learning her craft, understanding the psychological nuances of client management, witnessing how budgets are actually allocated, and crucially building an invaluable network of contacts. She was a sponge.
And because she was willing to put in that foundational time, the payoff she enjoys now is almost unbelievable. She eventually went freelance, and because she achieved such high-level mastery, she now operates with supreme efficiency.
Yeah, her schedule is amazing.
It is. She realized through trial and error that she does her absolute best, most highly focused cognitive work between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. After 1 p.m., her brain is basically fried, so she simply doesn't schedule meetings during that 4-hour block. She locks in. And she gets 8 hours of typical distracted agency work done in just 4 hours.
And here's the key question. How does she get away with that? Why don't her clients demand she sit at a desk until 5 p.m. and answer their emails instantly?
Because she's too good.
Exactly. Because she is so incredibly competent, her clients do not care how many hours she is physically sitting in a chair. They only care about the exceptional results she consistently delivers. Her mastery bought her autonomy.
The text also brings up Saul Orwell, who built Examine.com into a highly profitable 7-figure business. Here's another great example. Because he achieved absolute mastery in his specific niche, analyzing nutritional research, he had the leverage to refuse outside funding.
Right.
He had venture capitalists knocking on his door wanting to give him millions of dollars. But he actively chose to maintain full control of his company. And you know why? Because his priority was walking his dog in the middle of the day and taking Wednesday afternoon dance classes.
And that is the crux of it right there. If Saul had taken VC money, he would have surrendered his autonomy entirely. His new board of directors wouldn't give a damn about his Wednesday dance classes. They would demand he be in the office grinding out a 10x return on their investment.
So the great irony here is that to get the ultimate freedom, the ability to work whenever and however you want, to walk your dog at noon, you first have to subject yourself to the rigorous, highly structured grind of mastering your craft, often under someone else's rules, for years. Autonomy isn't the starting line, it's the finish line of the mastery phase.
Exactly. But once you cross that finish line, once you have that hard-won autonomy, you unlock the ability to control your own pace. And that naturally leads us to the third core trait of a company of one, speed.
Speed.
However, we have to completely redefine what speed means in this context.
Right, because usually when we hear speed in business, we picture chaos. We picture people frantically rushing, chugging coffee, burning the midnight oil, and cramming 50 tasks into a 12-hour day just to hit a crazy deadline.
Right, that is the corporate definition of speed, which is really just panic.
Yeah.
For a company of one, speed is not about velocity of movement. It is about efficiency of trajectory. It is about finding the absolute straightest, most efficient method to accomplish a specific goal without any wasted motion. And what's truly fascinating here and deeply counterintuitive is that the text argues that this kind of speed thrives under strict constraints.
Which sounds completely backward. I mean, constraints are almost universally viewed as a negative in business. We don't have enough time, we don't have enough budget, we don't have enough staff. How can that possibly make you faster?
Let's look at the mechanics of it. The text uses the software company Basecamp as a prime example. Basecamp is famous for its unorthodox management style. During the summer months, they enforce a strict 4-day work week.
Wow.
They physically constrain the amount of time their employees are legally allowed to work.
Wait, let's pause there because I really want to understand the mechanics of this.
Yeah.
How exactly does chopping a day off the calendar make people more productive? Doesn't the work just pile up into a massive, stressful mountain on Friday morning?
It would if they tried to do 5 days of work in 4 days. But that's not what happens. This taps into Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion.
Wow.
If you give someone a week to write a report, it takes a week. If you give them 2 days, they get it done in 2 days. By enforcing a 4-day constraint, Basecamp forces an operational reckoning. The team is forced to ruthlessly prioritize.
So they had to cut the fat.
Exactly. They have to look at their to-do list and say, okay, we literally do not have time for all of this. What actually moves the needle and what is just busy work? They eliminate the 2-hour synchronous meetings that could have been an email. They start polishing features that customers don't actually use. The constraint forces them to strip away the fat.
That forced prioritization becomes the engine of speed. I see it now. And this agility, this ability to strip things down and move efficiently, allows small teams to pivot in ways that massive corporations simply cannot fathom. The story of Stuart Butterfield in the text is the ultimate proof of this concept in action.
Butterfield's story is legendary precisely because of how he utilized constraints. He didn't start out trying to build billion-dollar enterprise software. He was a guy trying to build online video games.
Right.
He and his small team built a game called Game Never Ending, and it flopped. It failed to gain meaningful traction. But here's the critical part. Because his team was small, and because they were rapidly running out of money, which is the ultimate constraint, they were forced to pivot at lightning speed. They couldn't afford to spend 6 months analyzing why the game failed.
So what did they do?
They looked at the wreckage of the game and realized that the photo sharing feature they had built into it was actually really good.
Yeah.
Better than the game itself. So they rapidly stripped out the photo sharing code, rebuilt it as a standalone product, and launched it.
And what was it?
That pivot became Flickr, which they eventually sold to Yahoo for tens of millions of dollars.
Which is a massive, life-changing success. But then, incredibly, he essentially does the exact same thing again.
Yeah.
Years later, he tries to build another video game called Glitch. And once again, the game itself fails. It just doesn't catch on.
Unlucky with games.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But his small, highly constrained team had built a really slick internal communication tool just to talk to each other while coding the game.
And once again, under the brutal constraint of failure and dwindling funds, they pivot at high speed. They strip away the failed game, take that internal chat tool, polish it, and launch it to the public. That tool was Slack.
The Slack.
Yes. It became a multi-billion-dollar company that completely redefined how businesses communicate.
Think about the mechanics of that compared to a massive corporation. If Butterfield had been a VP operating inside a giant hierarchical tech firm, those pivots would have been literally impossible. A Fortune 500 company takes a year, 6 department heads, a barrage of focus groups, and months of legal review just to approve a minor change in direction.
Precisely. A massive ship takes miles to turn around. A company of one, however, can realize a product is failing on a Friday afternoon, rewrite the code over the weekend, and pivot the entire company's focus by Monday morning. That lack of inertia is the true power of speed.
But that speed is only possible if your operations are incredibly streamlined.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are bogged down in technical debt or internal politics or convoluted workflows, you can't move fast no matter how small you are.
Right.
And that brings us to the final piece of the toolkit, simplicity. Fast movement requires a lack of baggage. The text lays out this perfect David versus Goliath story to illustrate this, and I find it so satisfying. We have to talk about the bookmarking site, Delicious, and its one-man rival, Pinboard.
Oh, this case study is the ultimate masterclass in how complexity is the enemy of the company of one, while simplicity is its greatest, most lethal weapon. So in this story, Delicious was the Goliath. In the mid-2000s, it was a heavily funded, highly complex social bookmarking site. It was the absolute darling of Silicon Valley. It grew rapidly, hiring massive teams and adding endless, convoluted social features. And it was eventually sold to Yahoo for somewhere between $15 and $30 million.
The ultimate Silicon Valley success story, right? But then the complexity catches up to them.
Exactly. Its massive infrastructure, its bloated code base, and its constant feature creep made it unprofitable and incredibly unwieldy to manage. Yahoo didn't know what to do with it, so they eventually sold it to a company called Avos Systems.
Okay.
Avos tried to, quote-unquote, innovate, by removing popular features and adding complex new ones, which completely alienated the core user base.
Ah.
Then Alvo sold it to Science Inc. Delicious was bleeding users, hemorrhaging cash, and just bouncing between corporate owners who couldn't handle the complexity.
Meanwhile, out in the background, you have Dated. You have a site called Pinboard, created by literally one guy, Maciej Jaglowski. He watched the bloated mess of Delicious and decided to go the opposite route. He didn't take a single dime of investor money. So he built a dead simple, incredibly fast bookmarking tool that lacked all the social bells and whistles. It just did one thing flawlessly. And instead of playing the Silicon Valley game of free users now, monetize later, he just charged a flat, simple fee of $3 to $11 a year.
And because his system was so simple, his overhead was practically zero. He operated it as side business for a while until it reliably made enough for him to go full-time. He offered a product that simply worked, and he treated his paying customers with respect.
And here is the punchline.
Yes.
This is the moment where the power of simplicity truly reveals itself. In 2017, after years of outlasting the chaos, the one-man operation at Pinboard bought the massive, complex, multi-million-dollar giant Delicious for a mere $35,000.
I just love that so much. He literally bought his Goliath for pennies, extracted whatever minor value was left, and then shut the Goliath down. One guy, operating with relentless simplicity, outlasted tens of millions of dollars in venture capital and corporate engineering.
It is a stunning, undeniable victory for simplicity. The lesson here is that as companies grow, they almost inevitably take on additional, often unnecessary complexities. They add layers of middle management that justify their existence by creating more meetings.
Yep.
They launch tangential products that dilute their focus. They integrate a dozen different software tools. These complexities drain resources and slow the company to a crawl. Jaglowski won because he stripped his idea down to its absolute essence and fiercely protected that simplicity.
He did. However, the text issues a critical warning here. We must be very careful not to mistake simple for easy.
Oh, that is such a trap. I have fallen into this myself. We think, I want to make my workflow simpler, so we buy 3 new complicated software tools that promise to automate our lives.
Right.
But then we end up spending half our day watching YouTube tutorials just trying to get the tools to sync with each other. We thought we were making it easy, but we actually just made our workflow vastly more complex and fragile.
Exactly. True simplicity requires rigorous, uncomfortable discipline. It is an active process of reduction. It means looking at your operations every single day and asking what steps, what tools, what meetings can be completely removed from this process while keeping the end result the exact same or better.
Yeah.
It means having the discipline to start with a single paying customer and learning what they truly value rather than spending 6 months building a massive, complex, automated sales funnel before you even know if your product works. Simplicity is hard work.
Okay, so let's synthesize this journey so far. Let's say you master all of this. You do the hard work. You build your psychological resilience so you can take a punch.
Right.
You achieve tree mastery in your field, which earns you the leverage to demand autonomy.
Right.
You operate with constraint-driven speed to outmaneuver the giants, and you keep your systems beautifully, rigorously simple. If you do all of that, you are going to find success. It's almost inevitable. You will build a highly profitable company of one. But then, right at the moment of your greatest triumph, you face the final and perhaps most insidious challenge of all.
The temptation to grow.
Yes, you have to fight the beast when success makes it incredibly tempting to scale.
And this is where the entire philosophy comes to a head. This is where we have to fundamentally rewrite our definition of what success actually looks like in our society. Because society tells us very clearly that staying small is either just a temporary stepping stone on the way to becoming a giant corporation, or worse, it's a sign of failure.
Right. It's proof that you couldn't hack it in the big leagues.
Exactly. If you aren't trying to build an empire, you lack ambition. But the text aggressively argues that staying small should be viewed as a legitimate, highly strategic, and deeply ambitious end goal. Success is about finding the optimal size for your business and your life, and then focusing all your energy on getting better at that size, not bigger.
The story of Sean D'Souza and his company Psychotactics is the perfect embodiment of this conscious choice. He runs a highly successful consultancy and training program that teaches businesses the psychology of why customers buy. He's brilliant at it, and he made a conscious, incredibly deliberate decision to cap his company's profit at exactly $500,000 a year.
Which, let's be clear, is an incredibly healthy, life-changing profit margin for a small business. He had achieved absolute success. But the pivotal moment, the true test of his philosophy, came when a friend of his, who had also had a great financial year, suggested they both try to double their profits the following year. Push for the $1 million mark.
And most people would immediately say yes, like let's go for 7 figures. But Sean actually stopped and looked at the mechanics of what that would require. He realized that doubling his revenue wouldn't just magically happen with a push of a button. It would require a massive operational shift.
Exactly. Let's trace his thought process, because it's the core of the company of one mindset. To hit $1 million, he would need to take on twice as many clients or launch twice as many products.
Which means more work.
That meant he would have to hire more staff to handle the workload. He would have to deal with double the customer support emails. He would have to manage payroll and new operational headaches. He realized that doubling his revenue meant fundamentally doubling his daily stress.
And what was the actual human cost of that? It meant having the time he got to spend with his family. He looked at the equation and realized that $1 million in revenue paired with a miserable, stressed-out life was a terrible trade for $500,000 and total, unencumbered freedom.
So he refuses to grow. He hits his target and he stops. And instead of spending thousands of dollars on Facebook ads trying to acquire massive amounts of new leads, he takes his excess resources and spends them entirely on retaining the loyal customers he already has.
Yeah, the chocolates.
Right. He does things like sending them high-quality $20 boxes of chocolate out of the blue. He focuses on the depth of his customer relationships rather than the breadth of his market share.
It is a profound shift in priority. And to really drive home why Sean's approach is so smart, the text contrasts his story with a massive corporate cautionary tale that everyone listening will instantly recognize. Starbucks.
Oh, this is a great example.
We think of Starbucks today as an unstoppable global juggernaut, but in the late 2000s, they completely fell victim to the beast of excessive growth, and it almost killed them.
It's a fascinating operational failure. Starbucks was built on a very specific high-quality experience. The smell of roasted beans, the hiss of the espresso machine, the barista crafting your drink. But in their desperation to scale aggressively and constantly increase quarter-over-quarter revenue for Wall Street, they lost their mind. They diluted their core product.
Right, they started selling hot breakfast sandwiches, which sounds like a great way to boost the average ticket price, but what actually happened operationally?
The mechanics of it were a disaster. First, the smell of burnt cheese and breakfast meat completely overpowered the subtle, boutique smell of the coffee, which was their core sensory branding.
Yeah, it smelled like a fast food joint.
Exactly. Second, it fundamentally changed the barista's job. Instead of focusing on pulling the perfect shot of espresso, the barista was frantic, running back and forth to an oven, trying to scrape melted cheese off a tray while the drive-through line backed up into the street. They prioritized sheer transactional speed and menu expansion over the boutique coffee shop experience that made them special in the first place.
Oh, and they also started selling CDs at the register.
Yes, it was pure distraction.
And the market punished them for it. It almost broke the entire company. They were forced to close 900 stores globally.
900.
Yeah. They had to completely halt their aggressive growth strategy, bring their founder, Howard Schultz, back in to fix the mess, and painstakingly refocus the entire corporation on doing their one core thing well.
Yeah.
Making good coffee. They had to learn the incredibly hard, incredibly expensive way that bigger is not always better.
Which brings up a deep psychological trap that every entrepreneur, every freelancer, and every corporate employee faces daily.
Yeah.
The trap of envy.
Envy. It's so real.
We are bombarded by it. It is so incredibly easy to scroll through LinkedIn or Instagram, look at a competitor who is boasting about their massive new funding round, their huge new office, or their 100-person headcount, and instantly feel like you are failing, like you are falling behind in the game. But the text reminds us forcefully to distinguish between vanity metrics and financial reality.
This is so important. A competitor might boast online about making $500,000 a month in gross revenue, and you look at your own books and feel terrible. But what you don't see, what they aren't posting on social media, is that it takes them $550,000 a month in payroll, commercial rent, software subscriptions, and massive ad spends just to generate that $500,000.
Exactly. They are bleeding cash. They are losing money every single day, operating on razor-thin margins and hoping for a miracle buyout. Meanwhile, the company of one making $10,000 a month but operating out of a home office with practically zero overhead, keeping $9,000 of that in pure profit, they're actually vastly wealthier.
Wealthier in money and time.
They are wealthy in actual bankable profit, and they are wealthy in time and autonomy. A company of one trains themselves to focus entirely on actual profit margins and personal freedom, utterly ignoring the illusion of gross revenue and headcount.
So if we pull back and synthesize all of these incredibly rich, distinct threads into a single, unified takeaway for the listener, how do we define the true soul of this concept?
If we tie it all together, the defining characteristic, the very soul of a company of one, is the courage to question the default trajectory of growth. It is the deep operational understanding that blindly scaling up is a trap.
Yeah.
By consciously prioritizing psychological resilience over rigid, fragile corporate planning, by fiercely demanding autonomy and building the mastery required to sustain it, by using deliberate constraints to generate incredible speed and agility, and by viciously protecting operational simplicity against the creeping tide of complexity, anyone can build a business or carve out a highly lucrative career path within a larger company that actually scales in freedom and enjoyment, rather than just scaling in overhead, management, and stress.
That's beautifully said.
The ultimate paradigm-shifting insight you must take away from this entire deep dive is that better does not automatically mean bigger. Often they're complete opposites.
That is such a powerful, necessary shift in perspective. And as we wrap up, it leaves me thinking about where all of this is heading in the macro sense, because the landscape is shifting rapidly beneath our feet.
It really is.
If technology, and specifically artificial intelligence, is making it easier than ever to automate the heavy lifting, the coding, the data entry, the repetitive analysis, maybe the future of global business won't be dominated by a few massive, slow-moving bureaucratic corporations with millions of employees.
Maybe not.
Maybe the future economy will be defined by millions of highly specialized, hyper-efficient companies of one. Imagine a world where these autonomous individuals seamlessly collaborate on specific high-level projects, bringing their unique mastery to the table, and then smoothly disbanding when the project is done, operating together not as a rigid hierarchy, but like a massive, fluid global nervous system. What would your role be in that kind of ecosystem?
It's a fascinating question.
You know, we started this deep dive talking about that desire for a clean, binary answer to what success looks like. The corporate world has always told us that success is a jagged line pointing endlessly, relentlessly upward. More, more, more. But today, looking at the data, the case studies, and the mechanics of scale, we've seen that the real picture is much more nuanced and, frankly, much more beautiful. Sometimes the bravest and most profitable thing you can do is look at that chart, look at your life and say, right here, this is enough. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be waiting right here when you're ready to explore the next big idea. I mean, what if the ultimate goal of your business wasn't to, grow endlessly, but to figure out exactly when to stop?
That is, it's such a wild premise to start with.
Right, because it totally challenges everything we're taught.
Exactly. I mean, it literally violates the most fundamental operating system of the human brain. If you look at our evolutionary biology, the hardware running in our heads, it was forged in environments of extreme scarcity.
Yeah, like hunter-gatherer times.
Right. A hunter-gatherer who decided they had, enough berries or enough firewood was a hunter-gatherer who probably didn't survive the next winter.
Wow, yeah. That's true.
We are chemically incentivized by dopamine to accumulate. So more food, more territory, more resources, that just equaled survival.
And that biological imperative, it never really went away, did it? I mean, it just got a corporate rebrand.
A corporate rebrand. I love that. Yes.
Because instead of gathering firewood, we're gathering monthly recurring revenue or social media followers or market share.
Right. It's the exact same instinct.
It is. And the implicit message ingrained in every aspiring entrepreneur or even just freelancers and corporate managers is that growth is literally synonymous with success.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you launch a successful local bakery, the immediate expectation from everyone around you is that, well, you need to open a second location.
And then franchise it statewide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just operate under this unspoken assumption that more is a universal good.
Which is precisely the tension we are examining today. Because the tragedy of the modern economy is that applying that ancient, unchecked hunter-gatherer instinct to a modern business is, well, it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. So for anyone joining us in today's deep dive, we are exploring the revolutionary concept of staying small as an end goal.
Hmm.
You're going to learn why limiting your growth is actually a massive competitive advantage and why success in business should be about getting better, not just getting bigger.
Right, because whether you are an aspiring freelancer, a startup founder, or just someone looking to take back control of your career, this is really your blueprint for avoiding the toxic trap of the endless hustle.
I think the best place to start dismantling that hustle culture is at the very beginning of the entrepreneurial journey, like how we actually set targets.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because the standard operating procedure in corporate strategy is to establish what we can call lower bounds.
Right, the absolute minimum.
Exactly. Think about any quarterly earnings call or, sales meeting. The language is always framed around those minimums. Like,
Mm.
we need to clear at least $2 million in revenue this quarter, or we have to acquire a minimum of 5,000 new users this month.
And the psychological trap of the lower bound is it's the infinite runway it implies.
What do you mean by infinite runway?
Well, if you establish a floor, say $1 million, the assumption is that hitting 1.2 million is good, hitting 2 million is fantastic, and hitting 10 million is, the ultimate triumph.
Right. It's just higher and higher.
Exactly. It leaves the ceiling completely open, which means the pursuit is never actually finished. You are constantly running on a treadmill where the speed just keeps increasing.
And you eventually burn out.
You have to. You literally have to.
So the alternative presented in the source material is the implementation of an upper bound,
Yes.
meaning you actively design a ceiling into your business plan. Framing a goal as, I want to generate at least $1 million, but absolutely no more than 1.5 million.
It's such a counterintuitive idea, but it forces a completely different strategic posture. Let's examine the case of Sean D'Souza.
Okay, yeah, from Psychotactics.
Right, so he's the founder of a consultancy called Psychotactics. His business is built around decoding the psychological triggers that cause customers to make purchasing decisions.
Which is a huge market.
Oh, massive. By all conventional metrics, he is sitting on a highly scalable, high-demand digital business model. Yet he made a really calculated structural decision to cap his company's annual profit at exactly $500,000.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really struggle with the underlying logic of that constraint, specifically because of the nature of his business.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we were talking about a physical product, a cap makes intuitive sense, right? Like you only have so many hours in the day to manufacture something.
Sure.
But D'Souza is primarily selling digital services, courses, and consulting. The marginal cost of reproducing a digital product is essentially zero.
Mm-hmm.
So if thousands of people are showing up with credit cards in hand, eager to buy a digital course, turning them away just seems to defy basic microeconomics. I mean, it costs them nothing to let the server process those transactions.
Right.
Why artificially block revenue that requires zero additional manufacturing effort? To me, it's kind of like being at a buffet. Just because there's endless food doesn't mean eating until you burst makes you successful, makes you sick. But isn't he just leaving money on the table? If Sean has eager customers, why say no?
What's fascinating here is that the assumption that digital scale carries zero cost is actually one of the most pervasive myths in modern business.
Really? How so?
Well, yeah, it costs nothing to duplicate a PDF or, grant access to a video module, but you are not just duplicating a file, you are acquiring a human being.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that shifts the perspective.
Right. Every new customer introduces operational friction. They generate support tickets, they have billing issues, they expect community engagement.
And they dilute the intimacy of the existing customer base, I'd imagine.
Exactly. If D'Souza were to double his customer base overnight just because the digital delivery is frictionless, the administrative and psychological weight of managing all those human beings would just compound exponentially.
And he actually highlighted that exact psychological weight during a conversation with a colleague, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
The source text mentions a friend of his who had a phenomenal financial year and immediately declared his intention to double his revenue the following year. And the friend naturally assumed D'Souza would share this ambition.
Which is the default setting for most entrepreneurs.
Right. But instead, D'Souza posed a series of deeply structural questions. He asked, if I double my profits, what is the collateral damage to my calendar?
Such a great question.
How does that cascading workload impact my family dynamics? What am I sacrificing in my personal autonomy to service that newly acquired revenue?
He was conducting a holistic cost-benefit analysis that honestly most founders completely ignore. He understood that revenue does not exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And the desire to constantly scale is rarely driven by actual business necessity. It's driven by hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation. Let's talk about that because the sources mentioned James Clear here.
Yes, the author of Atomic Habits, he provides a perfect psychological case study for this in our sources.
What happened with him?
So when he launched his newsletter, he arbitrarily decided that 10,000 subscribers was the threshold for legitimate success.
Which is a big number to start with.
Oh, for sure. But he crossed that threshold rapidly, and he assumed he would feel this, sense of profound accomplishment.
But he didn't.
No. Instead, his baseline simply reset. The goalpost moved to 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And then he hit that metric, and again, his day-to-day reality remained entirely unchanged.
It really is the trap of the vanity metric. I mean,
Yeah.
we use these massive numbers as a proxy for social standing.
Totally.
It's so much easier to tell people at a dinner party that you have 1 million subscribers or, 50 employees than it is to explain that you have a highly optimized, low-stress business serving a tiny fraction of that.
Right, because people understand big numbers. But by rejecting that vanity metric, D'Souza frees up his operational bandwidth to focus on a metric that actually sustains the business long term.
Customer implementation.
Exactly. When you are not obsessed with top-of-funnel acquisition like frantically pouring money into Facebook ads to replace the customers who are churning out the bottom,
Right.
you can redirect all that energy into the people who are already inside the ecosystem.
Which explains the chocolates.
Sweet chocolates, yes.
I love this detail. The sources mention how D'Souza will literally ship $20 worth of high-end chocolates to his clients.
Mm-hmm.
And he can afford the time, the logistics, and the mental bandwidth to surprise and delight his existing customer base precisely because his calendar isn't consumed by board meetings discussing how to capture the next 10,000 leads.
And the economic byproduct of that intimacy is just incredible retention.
Yeah, I bet.
Because when clients actually implement the teachings, because the founder has the bandwidth to ensure they succeed, they become walking billboards for the brand.
They buy every subsequent product.
Exactly. The lifetime value of a single customer in an upper-bound business model often dwarfs the value of a customer in a massive, churn-heavy, scalable model.
But this really requires a fundamental rewiring of how you view a surge in market demand.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you define your personal enough, let's say it's a specific revenue number that funds a comfortable lifestyle, your retirement accounts, your family's needs, then any demand that pushes you past that boundary is no longer an automatic victory.
Right, transforms into a transaction.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, if I accept this extra capital, what am I trading away? Am I selling my weekends? Am I selling my peace of mind?
And when founders fail to ask that question, they inadvertently give birth to what the source material refers to as the beast.
The beast. That sounds ominous.
It is. This is the systemic vulnerability that emerges when a company decides to chase infinite scale. Once you orient a business around aggressive growth, you create an organism that constantly demands to be fed.
Okay, so if hitting an upper bound protects your personal time, what actually happens to the business itself when you ignore that bound and just chase infinite scale?
Well, the story of Danielle Laporte is a masterclass in the destructive nature of the beast.
Right, the wellness brand.
Yeah, she had built this highly successful, intimately connected personal brand in the self-development and wellness space. Her audience resonated specifically with her unique voice, her personal philosophies, and her distinct aesthetic.
Very personality driven.
Extremely. But she internalized the pervasive narrative that a successful business must secure outside funding to multiply its reach.
Oh.
So she accepted $400,000 in venture capital.
See, the moment you accept institutional capital, the physics of your business change immediately.
They really do. Venture capital is not designed to support a comfortable, steady-state lifestyle business.
Not at all.
The financial architecture of a VC fund requires their portfolio companies to seek 10x or 100x returns to offset the inevitable failures of other investments in the fund.
So by taking that $400,000, Laporte effectively signed a contract promising to prioritize hypergrowth above all other considerations.
Exactly. And the investors made that explicitly clear by forcing the hiring of what the text calls a wunderkind CEO to take over operations.
I find the mechanics of this fascinating from a corporate governance perspective.
Right.
Like, how does a founder whose literal name is on the digital marquee allow herself to be marginalized within her own enterprise?
It's wild, but it happens through the relentless prioritization of scale over authenticity.
Right.
The new CEO and the investor board looked at the business through the lens of friction. Laporte's highly personalized, hands-on approach is inherently unscalable. You cannot mass produce individual human connection.
You just can't.
So to hit the growth targets demanded by the $400,000 injection, the board had to transition the company from a high-touch relational model to a low-touch broadcast model. They needed to commoditize the content.
Which meant minimizing the actual human being the brand was named after.
Yes. Within 6 months, they reduced Laporte's role to writing a handful of blog posts a month. They slashed her compensation.
That is heartbreaking.
The pursuit of scale essentially hollowed out the core value proposition of the company. She was eventually ousted by the very corporate structure she had agreed to build.
So she became a casualty of her own growth strategy.
She really did.
Yeah.
But when she eventually reclaimed her autonomy and rebuilt her business as a solo enterprise, she coined a brilliant phrase.
Oh, was it?
She talked about the necessity of killing the Kraken.
Oh, killing your own Kraken. I like that.
Right. Instead of utilizing massive amounts of capital to forcefully broadcast her message to millions of indifferent people, she pivoted to a model of deep retention. Her new philosophy was simply to feed those who show up for dinner.
Feed those who show up for dinner. That is the exact antithesis of the strategy Starbucks employed during their darkest era.
Oh, Starbucks is such a good example here.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we tend to think of the beast as something that only threatens naive startups or solo founders who lose control of their cap tables. But the exact same operational destruction happens at the massive corporate level.
It absolutely does. Starbucks in the late 2000s is the textbook definition of the economies of scale trap.
Break that down for us.
Well, Howard Schultz had originally built the company on a very specific, deeply romanticized value proposition, the Italian coffee house experience.
Right, the third place.
Yes, the third place between work and home. It was defined by the sound of grinding espresso beans, the smell of roasted coffee, and the expertise of the barista.
But Wall Street demands quarter-over-quarter growth. So once Starbucks had saturated the market with coffee shops, simply selling more espresso wasn't enough to appease shareholders.
No, they had to increase the average ticket price per customer, so they started chasing scale through product diversification.
Which means?
They introduced an endless array of sugary, blender-heavy frappuccinos. They started selling CDs near the registers.
I remember the CDs.
Right. And most disastrously, they introduced hot breakfast sandwiches.
Hot sandwiches. Okay, the introduction of the hot sandwich is a perfect illustration of how the pursuit of revenue growth can destroy the operational core of a business.
It really is, because on a spreadsheet, adding a sandwich seems like a brilliant way to capture the morning commuter breakfast market.
Sure.
But look at the systemic friction it introduced.
The operational cascade is staggering. First, an espresso shot takes roughly 30 seconds to pull. A barista can maintain a really high throughput rhythm. But a hot sandwich, that requires a barista to step away from the espresso machine, open a plastic wrapper, place the item in a commercial oven, wait for it to heat, use tongs to retrieve it, and bag it.
It's so much extra work.
You have instantly destroyed the throughput velocity of your store. The lines get longer, the commuters get angry.
And then there's the sensory degradation.
Oh, yes.
The commercial ovens required to heat those sandwiches at scale, they fundamentally altered the environment. The smell of melting cheddar cheese and burnt bacon completely overpowered the delicate aroma of roasted coffee beans.
So the third place coffeehouse experience was essentially replaced by the ambiance of a fast food drive-thru.
Exactly. And to manage this massive influx of complex menu items, they had to implement incredibly complicated logistical systems.
Right.
They needed specialized supply chains for perishable foods. They needed massive centralized distribution centers. They needed new training protocols for food safety compliance.
This is the infinite loop of complexity that defines the beast. You pursue growth by adding a new product line. That product line introduces operational complexity. To manage the complexity, you have to hire more middle management, build new software systems, and expand your corporate infrastructure.
Yep.
Now your fixed costs have skyrocketed. Because your fixed costs are so high, you are under even more pressure to generate revenue, so you introduce yet another product line.
It is an Ouroboros. The snake is eating its own tail, and the company is rotting from the inside out.
Yeah.
The result for Starbucks was catastrophic. The brand dilution and the bloated operational costs forced them to shutter 900 stores.
900 stores.
They had to execute a massive, humiliating retreat. They closed every single remaining store in the country for an afternoon just to retrain their baristas on the fundamental act of pulling a proper shot of espresso.
That's wild. They had to intentionally shrink the business to save it.
Exactly. The lesson here is that throwing more at a problem is the laziest form of corporate strategy.
Wow.
If revenue is stagnant, the default assumption is to spend more on marketing to acquire new customers. If operations are sloppy, the default is to hire more managers. It requires significantly more discipline to look inward and ask, how do we refine our existing processes? How do we deliver exponentially more value to the customer who is already standing at the register?
Okay, so if we accept this premise, if we deliberately ignore mass expansion and we reject the Starbucks model of selling everything to everyone, we run into a very real logistical wall.
Okay, what's the wall?
The pushback from any ambitious entrepreneur is going to be about financial upside. If you deliberately restrict the size of your audience and the scope of your operations, how do you actually generate wealth? How does a company of one increase its profitability without working 100-hour weeks to handle the demand?
Right. Well, you transition from scaling your production volume to scaling your pricing power and your quality.
Scaling price and quality, not production.
Yes. You stop trying to sell to everyone, and you aggressively filter your market until you are only serving the absolute highest tier of clientele.
Okay, give me an example of this, the physical constraint aspect.
The ultimate example of this is Leah Andrews. She's the founder of Queen of Snow Globes.
Queen of Snow Globes.
Okay, she designs and manufactures bespoke, highly intricate snow globes. And we are not talking about cheap plastic souvenirs, right? These are custom art pieces commissioned by Hollywood directors like Quentin Tarantino, A-list actors like Channing Tatum, and major corporate clients.
So her business model is essentially defined by its lack of scalability.
Exactly. She cannot outsource the creation of these pieces to a mass manufacturing facility overseas without entirely compromising the artisanal quality that makes them valuable in the first place.
Right, because that's the whole point.
Her own time and artistic bandwidth are the absolute bottlenecks of the company.
So what happened when she started gaining massive media attention? Because I imagine the demand for her work just skyrocketed.
Oh, it did. Her inbox was flooded with hundreds of commission requests. Now, the traditional business playbook dictates that she should have immediately leased a massive warehouse, hired a dozen apprentices, secured a line of credit to buy raw materials in bulk, and attempted to fulfill every single order.
Just cash in on the hype.
Right. But doing so would have fundamentally changed her job description. She would no longer be an artist crafting custom snow globes. She would become a middle manager overseeing a small factory.
Dealing with payroll, human resources, quality control.
Yeah. She would have taken on massive overhead and stress just to accommodate the lower end of her demand curve.
Instead, she utilized the most elegant mechanism in microeconomics.
Price elasticity.
Yes. When demand vastly exceeded her physical supply, she didn't scale her supply, she simply raised her prices. And she continued to raise them, systematically pricing out the bottom 80% of her inquiries until the demand perfectly matched the volume of work she could comfortably execute herself.
It is the economic concept of a Veblen good, or, at least operating adjacent to it.
The Veblen good.
Yeah, where higher prices actually drive higher demand because of the perceived status. By raising the price significantly, she didn't just reduce demand. She likely increased the perceived prestige and exclusivity of the product for her remaining high-end clients.
Well, that makes sense.
She optimized her profit margins without adding a single unit of complexity to her operational life.
It makes me think of the economics of a highly exclusive nightclub.
Okay, I like this. Go on.
Let's say you have a venue with a strict fire code capacity of 100 people. It develops a reputation for having the best music and the best atmosphere in the city. Suddenly, there are 1,000 people lined up down the block every Friday night.
Right, huge demand.
The hypergrowth mindset looks at that line and says, we're leaving money on the table. We need to buy the building next door, knock down the adjoining wall, and cram all 1,000 people inside.
Which completely ruins the vibe.
Exactly. The moment you expand the capacity to 1,000, you destroy the intimacy and exclusivity that made the club desirable in the first place. It is no longer a cool, curated environment. It is a sweaty, chaotic warehouse.
And you have exponentially increased your overhead.
Yep.
You need 10 times the security staff, 10 times the bartenders, and massively increased liability insurance. The far more sophisticated business move is to keep the capacity locked at exactly 100 people and dramatically increase the cover charge and the price of bottle service.
Exactly. You operate the venue for the exact same number of hours. You employ the exact same number of staff. Your operational complexity remains totally flat, but your profit margins expand massively. Lee Andrews operates her studio like that exclusive nightclub.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this strategy is not an isolated anomaly. No, the source material points to data from the U.S. Census Bureau that reveals a staggering economic reality. There are nearly 40,000 non-employee establishments in the United States, meaning businesses consisting of a single individual with zero W-2 employees that generate over $1 million in annual revenue.
Wow. 40,000 solo operators clearing 7 figures. That completely shatters the myth that you need to build a massive organizational chart to achieve serious financial success.
It really proves the concept of better, not bigger. Optimizing for margin rather than optimizing for headcount is a highly viable path to wealth. Another brilliant case study in the text is Miranda.
The freelance copywriter.
Yes, the freelance copywriter who operates from a yurt in the Sierra Nevada foothills.
I love that visual. She is the perfect foil to the traditional agency model. As a highly skilled copywriter, she easily had enough incoming client demand to transition from a solo freelancer to an agency founder.
Right, she could have scaled easily.
She could have leased office space, hired junior copywriters, taken a cut of their hourly rates, and built a firm.
But she recognized the hidden psychological tax of organizational growth.
The psychological tax, yes.
The moment you transition from a solo operator to an employer, you absorb the existential weight of your employees' livelihoods.
That's a heavy burden.
It is. You are no longer just writing copy to pay your own bills. You are responsible for making sure your junior writers can pay their mortgages, fund their healthcare, and feed their children.
And the stress of that responsibility is profound. It forces agency owners to constantly hunt for new client accounts. Not because they want the work, but because they have to feed the payroll beast they created.
Exactly. Miranda realized that her definition of success was not building an empire. It was writing copy in a peaceful environment. By refusing to scale, she protected her mental health and her autonomy.
So practically speaking, if your demand exceeds your capacity, do not immediately hire more people or build a bigger factory.
Right. Raise your rates. Let the price point naturally filter your clientele until you are working with the best customers for the highest margin.
Okay, so all of this makes absolute sense for a freelance writer in a yurt or an artist making snow globes. It is easy to grasp how a solo operator can leverage physical constraints. But the real stress test for this philosophy is whether it can survive in the brutal, capital-intensive arenas of corporate America.
Ah, yes. Big business.
So what does this all mean for massive organizations? Can a company dealing with physical infrastructure and thousands of employees successfully act like a company of one?
They can, and honestly, the data suggests that the massive corporations that voluntarily constrain their own growth are the ones that survive the longest.
Okay, lay it on me.
Let's examine the aviation industry, specifically Southwest Airlines in the mid-1990s.
Aviation is an incredibly unforgiving business.
It's brutal. The margins are razor thin, the capital expenditures are astronomical, and the industry is notoriously vulnerable to macroeconomic shocks like fuel price spikes or economic recessions.
Right.
But in 1996, Southwest Airlines had perfected their low-cost point-to-point operational model. They were highly profitable, and the market recognized it.
So much so that over 100 cities wanted Southwest Airlines to expand to them. Right?
Exactly. Over 100 municipal governments petitioned Southwest to bring their service to their local airports. They had the market demand, they had the brand reputation, and crucially, they had access to the capital required to execute a massive nationwide expansion.
But wait, if you were the CEO of an airline, and 100 cities are begging you to open routes, traditional corporate strategy dictates that you seize the market share immediately. I mean, if you don't take those routes, Delta or American Airlines will. Turning them down sounds like corporate malpractice. Why would an airline do that?
This raises an important question, and to understand why leaving 96 markets on the table is actually an act of strategic brilliance rather than corporate malpractice, we have to look at the concept of the safety margin.
Safety margin.
Let's break down the actual economics of what happens if Southwest had said yes to all 100 cities. It is not just about drawing lines on a map. Expanding into 100 new airports means purchasing billions of dollars worth of new Boeing 737s. It means negotiating expensive multi-year leases for terminal gates. It means hiring thousands of pilots, flight attendants, and ground crew members in a highly competitive labor market.
You're basically leveraging your balance sheet to the absolute maximum.
Yes. If you expand to meet 100% of the peak market demand during a booming economy, you have to operate your company at 100% capacity just to service the debt and overhead you took on to build that infrastructure.
Which means you have zero operational and financial slack in your system.
Zero. And the aviation industry never stays in a boom cycle for long. When the inevitable recession hits or the price of jet fuel doubles overnight, passenger demand plummets.
Your fixed costs do not plummet.
No, they don't. You still have to pay the leases on the planes, you still have to pay the terminal fees. Because the airlines that chased peak expansion had no safety margin, the moment revenue dipped, they lacked the cash reserves to absorb the shock.
So they were forced into massive layoffs, brutal restructuring, or outright bankruptcy.
Exactly. By voluntarily capping their growth at 4 cities, Southwest maintained massive operational slack. They kept their cash reserves high and their debt load manageable.
And they protected their quirky, highly efficient corporate culture because they weren't trying to onboard 10,000 new employees simultaneously.
Right. They treated aggressive growth not as an obligation to the market, but as a severe risk to their long-term survival. They prioritized endurance over dominance.
Wow. Build a safety margin into your business. Do not operate at 100% capacity just because the market is booming. Leaving room to breathe ensures you survive when the market crashes.
That philosophy is echoed in the story of Ricardo Semler and Simco Partners, another massive corporate entity detailed in the text.
What happened with them?
Well, Semler grew his manufacturing conglomerate to $160 million in revenue. He achieved a state where his company possessed a unique worldwide competitive advantage in their specific niche. And then he actively instituted policies to halt the company's growth.
Halted completely. It's the corporate equivalent of Sean D'Souza capping his profits at $500,000, just operating with a few more zeros on the balance sheet.
Exactly. And Semler's rationale is beautifully captured in a rhetorical analogy he uses. He points out that a classical symphony orchestra typically consists of about 120 musicians.
Okay.
It produces a rich, complex, perfectly balanced sound. If that configuration is successful, why wouldn't a symphony of 600 musicians be 5 times better?
Because the addition of 480 instruments doesn't increase the quality of the music. It destroys it.
Exactly. The acoustic environment becomes muddy. The conductor can no longer effectively communicate with the back rows. The logistical complexity of moving 600 musicians and their instruments around the world makes touring impossible.
Adding scale simply introduces deafening chaos.
And the same physical limitations apply to human organizations. Beyond a certain threshold, the communication breakdowns, the bureaucratic red tape, and the cultural dilution vastly outweigh the benefits of increased revenue.
So Semler understood that $160 million was the optimal acoustic size for his particular orchestra. Any growth beyond that would have degraded the quality of the performance.
The overarching principle here, whether you are Miranda in her yurt or the CEO of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate, is that building a safety margin gives you the ultimate luxury in business, the ability to endure.
By keeping your overhead low, deliberately turning away marginal opportunities, and leaving room to breathe, you construct an entity that is fundamentally anti-fragile.
Exactly.
I feel like when we pull all of these disparate threads together, the psychological boundaries of Sean D'Souza, the venture capital trap of Danielle Laporte, the operational collapse of Starbucks, the price elasticity of Queen of Snow Globes, and the disciplined safety margins of Southwest Airlines, a singular, unified truth really emerges here.
And what's that?
Growth is not an unalterable law of business success. Growth is a choice.
It really is. The most dangerous assumption in business is that you are failing if you are not expanding. The reality is that choosing to stay small or choosing to stop growing at an optimal size is an incredibly sophisticated, highly profitable, strategic decision.
It completely reframes the internal dialogue of the entrepreneur. The default operating system tells you to wake up every morning and ask, what is the fastest way to make this business bigger? How do I capture more territory?
Right.
But the philosophy of the upper bound requires you to wake up and ask, what can I do today to make this business fundamentally better? How can I increase the quality of my output without increasing the footprint of my operations?
Because optimizing for better inherently protects your autonomy, your profit margins, and your mental health. It recognizes that scaling up your revenue and your personal freedom often requires actively resisting the societal urge to scale up your payroll, your real estate, and your complexity.
It's about recognizing that enough is not a stepping stone to real success. And it's not a consolation prize for failing to scale. It is a deliberate, highly profitable, and emotionally sustainable end goal.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into finding your enough. Understanding why staying small is a competitive advantage is the first step, but executing that strategy requires a very specific type of leadership.
It definitely does.
Now that we know why staying small is the ultimate goal, it completely changes the type of person you need to be to run the show. Next time, we will explore exactly what is required to lead when you're a company of one, and why being a quiet, introverted generalist might just be your ultimate superpower.
As you move forward this week, think about the last goal you set for yourself. Did it have an upper limit, or were you just running toward a horizon that will always keep moving? This week, challenge yourself to define exactly what your enough looks like, because until you define your finish line, you will never be able to stop running. What if the loud, charismatic, hustle 24/7 leader we've all been told to emulate is actually, well, the worst possible person to run a sustainable, resilient business?
Yeah, it completely upends decades of deeply ingrained corporate mythology.
Yeah.
I mean, the data is telling us that our fundamental template for leadership is just, it's fundamentally broken.
We are so conditioned by Hollywood and Silicon Valley narratives. You picture a leader and you immediately think of absolute dominance, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You picture someone barking orders, running on 2 hours of sleep, crushing the competition, and just exuding this, I don't know, exhausting, relentless energy. We treat that as the gold standard.
Right.
But today we are dismantling that myth. We are tearing it down to the studs to look at the actual mechanics of what makes a business survive and thrive on its own terms.
And we are replacing that broken template with a framework that actually protects your sanity, your team, and, your bottom line.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into an incredibly fascinating section of Paul Jarvis's book, Company of One, specifically focusing on the chapter called What's Required to Lead.
It's a great chapter.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive is to extract the exact traits, skills, and boundaries required to lead a nimble, autonomous business. And this applies whether you are a solo entrepreneur working from your kitchen table or if you're managing a small, agile team within a massive multinational corporation.
Yeah, the scale almost doesn't matter.
Right, because the rules of the game have fundamentally shifted. Clinging to the old models is not just outdated, it's actively dangerous to your success.
It really is. So in this deep dive, you are going to learn how to redefine leadership away from endless growth and burnout. We'll be focusing instead on calibrated guidance, generalist skills, and this idea of radical self-awareness.
It's huge.
Yeah. We will explore why introverts often make superior bosses, why total economy is actually a trap, and how to cure the biological power tumor that destroys human empathy.
The power tumor. That part is wild.
It's terrifying, honestly. But this matters for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship because succeeding on your own terms requires you to manage your mind and your boundaries just as rigorously as you manage your profits.
So let's start with the elephant in the room, the prototypical leader. The loud, type A, charismatic extrovert. The person who walks into a room and just sucks up all the oxygen.
Right, the classic CEO archetype.
Yeah, and for years I assumed that was just a genetic lottery. You either have the X factor, that innate ability to mesmerize a room, or you don't. You're either Steve Jobs on a stage, or you're the person taking notes in the back.
And that assumption is the exact myth Jarvis tackles first. And what is so compelling about the research here is that science completely dismantles the idea of the born leader.
Wait, completely?
Completely. Research from the University of Lausanne Business School proved that charisma isn't an innate genetic trait at all. It is not an aura. It is a highly specific, deployable set of tactics.
So it's something you can learn.
Exactly. The researchers took managers who had average or even below average natural presence, and they trained them in specific behaviors. The result was a measurable, massive improvement in their charismatic qualities and their effectiveness as leaders.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of that. When we say deployable tactics, what are we actually talking about? Because when I hear charisma training, my mind immediately goes to, like, cheap parlor tricks.
Right, like weird body language hacks.
Yeah. Are we talking about making specific hand gestures or manipulating vocal projection to sound more authoritative?
It is much deeper than just vocal projection. The Lausanne researchers identified what they call charismatic leadership tactics, or CLTs. These include things like the strategic use of stories and metaphors.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think about it. A non-charismatic leader presents raw data. They stand up and say, our profits are down 12%. But a trained charismatic leader uses a metaphor to make the data tangible and emotional. They'll say, "We are a ship taking on water faster than we can bail it out."
Oh, wow. That instantly shifts the energy in the room.
It does. They also use rhetorical questions, three-part lists, which inherently signal cognitive mastery to the listener, and they are highly deliberate about expressions of moral conviction. They also set exceptionally high expectations while simultaneously communicating total confidence that the team can meet them.
So it's a structural approach to communication. You're engineering the message to bypass the analytical brain and hit the emotional brain directly.
Precisely.
That is a massive relief for anyone who isn't naturally the life of the party. It means leadership presence is a craft you can hone, not a genetic trait you're missing.
Yeah, it levels the playing field completely.
But Jarvis pushes this even further, right?
Yeah.
He brings in research from Harvard Business School suggesting that not only is the loud extrovert model unnecessary, but in many modern business contexts, introverts might actually be significantly better suited for the job.
Yes, and the Harvard research by Adam Grant, Francesca Gino, and David Hoffman is a fascinating turning point in organizational psychology.
Adam Grant's work is always so good.
It really is. They found that introverted leaders consistently outperform extroverts under specific, very common modern conditions, specifically when they are managing skilled, proactive teams.
Let's pause on that because it's so counterintuitive.
Mhm.
Why would the quiet person in the room get better results than the cheerleader?
It's a great question.
I mean, if I have a proactive team full of go-getters, wouldn't they respond best to a high-energy, extroverted boss who matches their intensity?
You would think so, but the mechanism of interaction completely changes when you put an extrovert in charge of proactive people. Extroverted leaders naturally want to lead from the front. Their instinct is to speak first, set the agenda, and dominate the airwaves.
Right. They want to drive the car.
Exactly. And when they're managing passive employees who need to be told what to do, that extroversion works decently well. But if you have a highly skilled, proactive team people who are coming up with their own ideas, spotting inefficiencies, and trying to innovate, that top-down extroverted dominance becomes a massive roadblock.
Because the extrovert perceives the proactive employee's ideas as a challenge to their authority. Or even if they don't see it as a threat, they literally just talk over them before the idea can fully form.
That is the exact mechanism. The extroverted leader inadvertently shuts down the very innovation they hired those smart people to generate in the first place.
That's such a waste of talent.
It is. The skilled team becomes alienated. They stop offering ideas because they know the boss is just going to bulldoze them anyway. Introverted leaders, on the other hand, operate differently. Their default setting is to listen and process.
Right.
When a proactive employee brings an idea to an introverted boss, the boss listens carefully. They ask clarifying questions. They don't feel the need to immediately stamp their own ego on the idea.
They act as a filter, not a funnel. They absorb the information, process it, and then empower the team to execute. They basically let the smart people do the work they were hired to do.
And that builds profound trust. The team feels valued because their expertise isn't treated as a threat. This dynamic connects beautifully to the philosophy of servant leadership.
I've heard that term thrown around a lot in corporate seminars.
Yeah, while the term was popularized in the modern corporate world in the 1970s, the roots of the concept date back thousands of years to texts like the Tao Te Ching.
The philosophy that the leader is essentially a conduit. The leader exists to serve the followers, to remove obstacles from their path, rather than the followers existing to serve the whims of the leader.
Regent University conducted a major study on this, finding that a genuine desire to be of service to others and to empower them to grow is the defining factor in becoming and remaining an effective leader over the long term.
So it's about shifting the spotlight.
Exactly. The servant leader's primary objective is to shine a light on the team's wins. They elevate everyone else, and in doing so, the entire organization moves forward. They simply do not require the spotlight for themselves.
I was thinking about this dynamic, and I keep coming back to a specific visual. The traditional charismatic leader, the loud, dominant force, operates like a fireworks show.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's incredibly flashy, it's deafeningly loud, and everybody naturally stops what they're doing to look at it. You can't ignore a fireworks show. But the problem is, it's short-lived, it's exhausting, it consumes a massive amount of resources, and when it's over, it just leaves a bunch of smoke in the air, obscuring your vision.
That's a great point.
Crucially, you cannot navigate a ship by a firework.
That is a striking metaphor. The spectacle is the point, rather than the progress.
But the introverted servant leader operates like a lighthouse. A lighthouse is quiet, It is steady. It is deeply rooted in one specific spot. It isn't putting on a flashy show to demand attention for its own ego.
Right, it's just doing its job.
Exactly. It provides absolutely critical, unwavering guidance so everyone else can navigate dangerous waters safely. The lighthouse makes it entirely about the ships reaching the harbor, not about itself.
The lighthouse doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It just needs to provide clear, undeniable direction. And Jarvis highlights some incredible historical examples to prove that this quiet, expectation-setting approach is not just a nice theory, but a strategy that shifts paradigms. Consider Mahatma Gandhi.
To liberate an entire nation without ever firing a single bullet is just incredible.
He achieved the impossible. And he didn't do it through screaming dominance or aggressive alpha male posturing. He deployed those charismatic tactics we discussed earlier specifically, setting incredibly high expectations and demonstrating them through his own behavior.
He lived the message.
He did. He coupled a massive, seemingly unattainable goal with the quiet, unwavering confidence that his people could achieve it through peaceful protest. He was the ultimate lighthouse.
And Jarvis brings this exact same psychology into the corporate world with the story of Sharp, the electronics company, which I found fascinating because it involves an engineering pivot that was basically considered impossible at the time.
Yeah, the Sharp story is a perfect modern example. Katsuhiko Michida became the CEO of Sharp in 1999. The company was in dire straits, facing potential collapse.
And the traditional extroverted leadership playbook would dictate that he walk into the boardroom, yell at everyone to work twice as hard, fire the bottom 10%, and demand immediate short-term profits.
Exactly. Instead, he motivated his employees by setting a goal that sounded like absolute science fiction. He declared that Sharp would replace all of their CRT televisions, those massive, heavy, tube-based boxes that dominated the market, with thin LCD models by the year 2005.
Which is wild because in 1999, LCD technology was barely viable for small laptop screens, let alone giant living room televisions. He was essentially asking his engineering team to invent the future on a deadline.
It was a monumental, terrifying task. But the way Michida handled it is the textbook definition of introverted servant leadership. He combined that sky-high expectation with complete, unwavering confidence in his engineering team.
He didn't tell them how to build it.
No, not at all. He gave them the mandate, he secured the resources they needed, he trusted their expertise, and then, crucially, he got out of their way. He didn't micromanage the engineering, because he wasn't an engineer. He set the alignment, and he gave them the autonomy.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
The lighthouse analogy is great for managing a team of brilliant engineers or leading a philosophical movement. But let's bring this down to the listener who might be a literal company of one.
Sure.
Say you're a solo freelance designer or an independent consultant. You are walking into a boardroom to pitch a massive new client, trying to win a contract that will make or break your entire fiscal year. The people across the table are aggressive, high-powered executives. Don't you need that firework energy in that moment?
That's a really common fear.
Right. Don't you need to walk into that room, project supreme extroverted dominance, and essentially overpower them to close the deal?
This is a vital distinction to make, and it hinges on the difference between dominance and confidence. The corporate world often conflates the two. You absolutely need confidence.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in the value of your work, the client never will. You must set high expectations for what you can deliver. But confidence absolutely does not require extroverted dominance.
So how does the quiet person win that pitch?
By relying on the deployable tactics from the Lausanne study, you confidently explain your strategy. You use compelling stories to reframe the client's problem. You deploy metaphors that make your solution undeniable. You clearly articulate your value.
And you can do all that quietly.
Exactly. You could do all of this without ever raising your voice, without ever interrupting the client, and without trying to aggressively overpower the room's energy. In fact, think about the psychology of the executives you are pitching.
Okay.
If you come in loud and dominant, you trigger their defensive instincts. If you come in calm, deeply knowledgeable, and highly attentive to their specific pain points, you instill a much deeper level of trust. Competence is quiet. Insecurity is loud.
Competence is quiet. Insecurity is loud. That is a profound takeaway for anyone listening who has ever felt like they needed to fake a completely different personality just to succeed in business.
It takes so much pressure off.
It really does. If you are naturally quiet, Embrace it. Master the craft of clear storytelling, set those high expectations, and focus all your energy outward on empowering your team or your clients to succeed.
But this naturally leads to a trap. If the leader's job is to quietly empower others, to trust them completely, and to get out of the way, a lot of people misinterpret that as a mandate to remove all the rules.
The idea that if you just give people pure freedom, magic will happen. Like if you're a solo worker, just wake up and follow your muse wherever it takes you.
And that brings us directly to the concept of the alignment-autonomy balance. Because while pure freedom sounds like a utopia on paper, in the reality of running a business, it is incredibly destructive.
It sounds exhausting, honestly. A world with zero rules or structure isn't a playground, it's the wilderness. Let's explore why total autonomy is actually a trap.
It creates anarchy. And anarchy is the enemy of profitability, sustainability, and mental health. This is a highly relevant issue because today, roughly 79% of companies in the Fortune 1000 boast about having empowered, self-directed, or autonomous teams.
It's the ultimate corporate buzzword right now.
It is the reigning buzzword of modern management. But simply removing all processes and telling people you're autonomous now doesn't create innovation. It creates duplicated effort, massive anxiety, and total misalignment.
It's the illusion of pure autonomy. People think they are free, but they're actually just lost.
And Rick Nyberg, an incredibly respected management coach who has designed workflows for agile powerhouses like Lego and Spotify, breaks this down brilliantly. He identifies what he calls a false dichotomy between full autonomy and full alignment.
A false dichotomy? So we're looking at it the wrong way.
Yes. The corporate world often acts as though you have to pick a side on a slider scale. You either have total control or total freedom.
Let's clearly define those two ends of the spectrum so we understand the trap. Alignment, in the traditional rigid corporate sense, is do exactly what I say, exactly how I say to do it, and report back to me at every step. It is dictatorial.
Right.
Autonomy, in the extreme sense, is do whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want.
Yes. And Nyberg argues that assuming an organization has to choose between those two extremes is fundamentally flawed. A leader's true job, the actual mechanism of managing a company of one or an agile team, is to provide crystal clear direction and boundaries, which is the alignment, and then get completely out of the way, which is the autonomy.
It's like setting the boundaries of a playground. You build a very sturdy fence around a specific area. You tell the team, we are playing inside this fence today. That is the objective. But you let them choose which games to play, what equipment to use, and how to organize themselves inside those boundaries.
That is a perfect visualization. And maintaining that fence is a delicate, active balance. Let's look at the mechanisms of failure on both sides. If you provide too much guidance, if you draw a map of the playground and mandate exactly how many times someone must go down the slide, you create a bottleneck. The team realizes that they have no real agency, so they stop thinking critically.
They just wait to be told what to do.
Exactly. They start bringing every tiny, trivial decision to the leader. The leader becomes entirely paralyzed by decision fatigue. That is the reality of micromanagement. It completely defeats the financial and intellectual purpose of hiring smart people in the first place.
But if you provide too little guidance, if you just drop them in an open field with no fence and say, go have fun, you get the anarchy. One person is trying to build a sandcastle, another is trying to play baseball, someone else wandered into traffic.
Right. Everyone's running in different directions.
Everyone is exhausted, they're working incredibly hard, but the end goal is entirely missed. So the magical middle ground is clear goals, established processes, but total freedom in the execution of the daily tasks.
Now, let's extrapolate this to the solo entrepreneur, the literal company of one with 0 employees. This person is both the boss and the employee simultaneously. They have ultimate, undeniable autonomy. There is no one looking over their shoulder. So why do they need constraints? Who are they aligning with?
That is the million-dollar question for freelancers and solo founders. If I'm my own boss, why shouldn't I just wake up at noon, work from a coffee shop, and invent my day from scratch based on how I feel?
Because reinventing the wheel every single day is a psychological nightmare. They are aligning with their own long-term business goals, and they desperately need constraints to protect their own sanity and productivity.
Even if there are no employees.
Even a company without a single employee requires rigid direction and established processes. Let's look at the mechanics of delivering a service to a client. If you are a solo web developer, and every time you land a new client, you have to invent a brand new contract, Figure out a brand new onboarding process, code the basic framework of the site from scratch, and invent a new way to invoice them, you will burn out before you finish your third project.
The cognitive load of making all those foundational decisions repeatedly leaves you with zero brain power for the actual creative work they hired you to do. You have to lean on systems.
You absolutely have to. The more you can lean on standardized processes, rigid systems, and reusable building blocks, the better. We are talking about utilizing established code snippets, having standardized marketing language ready to deploy, using rigorous visual templates for your presentations, and automating your bookkeeping. These systems act as your alignment.
So, in a company of one, the system itself acts as the manager.
Precisely. The system micromanages the repetitive, mundane tasks. It acts as the rigid fence. And it does this so that your biological brain is free to engage in true creative autonomy. It is the common constraint that allows creativity to thrive.
That makes total sense.
If you have an airtight, automated process for onboarding a new client, you never have to waste a single drop of mental energy wondering what email you need to send them next. You can spend that entire reservoir of mental energy actually solving the client's unique, complex problem.
I want to ask the listener directly. Right now, think about your own workflow. Look at your daily habits. Are you suffering from too much freedom? If you wake up every morning and have to invent your entire process from scratch, decide what software to open, write every single routine email from a blank page. Wait, let me rephrase that. If you write every single routine email from a blank page, isn't that just a different form of tyranny? The tyranny of the blank page every single day is paralyzing.
It leads to severe decision fatigue. Your brain has a finite amount of high-quality decision-making power each day. If you spend it deciding how to format an invoice, you won't have it when it's time to write brilliant copy or design an innovative product.
So the practical, undeniable takeaway here is this. To lead effectively, whether you are managing a highly skilled team of 10 or it's just you sitting at your kitchen table, you must establish strict systems and common goals first. Let those systems handle the mundane micromanaging. That is the price you pay to buy the freedom to enjoy true creative autonomy within those boundaries.
But setting up those systems, understanding how all those disparate pieces fit together, the onboarding, the marketing, the coding, the invoicing it, requires a very specific type of intellectual tool set.
Right. If you are building the systems, managing the goals, and steering the ship, you cannot just be the person in the engine room obsessively tightening one specific bolt. You have to step out of your specific lane. You have to understand the whole ship. You have to become a generalist.
This represents a massive paradigm shift in how we are taught to view our careers. From a very young age, society, and specifically the educational system, conditions us to hyper-specialize. You are told to pick a major, then pick a highly specific career track, and learn to do one incredibly narrow task better than anyone else on the planet.
The assumption is that specialization equals security.
Exactly.
We hear that constantly from business gurus. The riches are in the niches. Become the world's leading expert on left-handed scissors, and you'll never go hungry.
And while deep domain expertise is undeniably valuable, a company of one leader must operate differently. They must be a generalist. In fact, specific, narrow expertise is actually massively overvalued in today's highly volatile, deeply uncertain business world.
Overvalued. That is a bold claim. I mean, if I need brain surgery, I don't want a generalist. I want the guy who has done 10,000 left hemisphere tumor removals.
Well, for highly technical, repetitive physical procedures, yes. But business is not a controlled operating room. It is an ambiguous environment with rapidly shifting variables. Carter Phipps, the author of Evolutionaries, and Vikram Mansharamani, a lecturer at Yale, have both written extensively on this.
What do they say about it?
Mansharamani argues that if specialist knowledge is blind to everything else outside its narrow silo, it simply cannot function effectively in a business world filled with ambiguity and rapidly shifting metrics.
That makes sense.
Think about it. A specialist might know exactly how to optimize a Facebook ad campaign. But if a new privacy law makes Facebook ads obsolete overnight, that specialist is suddenly bankrupt. Phipps notes that as the world becomes increasingly complex, generalist people who have cultivated the ability to know a little bit about a lot of different fields will be the ones who survive and thrive. They can see the connections between disciplines.
Okay, I have to push back on this because it triggers my fear of mediocrity. If I am forced to be a generalist, if I'm spending my time learning a little bit about psychology, a little bit about accounting, a little bit about copywriting and sales, doesn't that inherently mean I am mediocre at everything? It's the classic insult jack of all trades, master of none. Why would a client ever hire a mediocre generalist over a master specialist?
That is the most common fear. But it fundamentally misunderstands the architecture of the modern generalist model. You do not abandon your core competency. You still start with a master skill. That is the foundational service or product you offer the world.
Okay, so you still have a specialty.
Yes, you are still an elite graphic designer or a brilliant back-end coder or a phenomenal structural engineer. But instead of only doing that one thing, you layer auxiliary skills on top of that deep foundation.
Like a T-shaped professional. You have deep expertise in one vertical area, but a broad horizontal understanding of many others. Or, as some people in tech call it, building a stack.
Exactly. You layer on a working knowledge of marketing, a functional understanding of bookkeeping, a deep appreciation for human psychology, and the mechanics of sales. You do this so that you have total uncompromising control over your own business ecosystem.
So you aren't at the mercy of everyone else.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of failure for a specialist. If you are a world-class coder but you refuse to learn anything about communication or sales because you're just an engineer, you will never convince a client to hire you. If you are a brilliant artist but you refuse to understand basic cash flow accounting, you will go bankrupt, even if you have a waiting list of clients.
You don't have to be a CPA, but you have to know how to read a profit and loss statement so your accountant doesn't rob you or so you don't accidentally spend your tax money. You aren't a master of none. You are a master of one, with functional defensive literacy and everything else.
And Jarvis outlines 5 essential generalist traits that every company of one leader needs to actively cultivate. Instead of seeing these as separate chores, we should view them as an interconnected web of survival skills.
What's the first one?
The first is psychology.
Understanding the internal mechanics of your customer's brain.
Yes, it is moving beyond just understanding what your product does to understanding why customers buy it, what they truly value, and why they churn. It is the operationalization of empathy.
Operationalizing empathy. I like that.
If you understand the psychology of your client, you can anticipate their needs. If you know why a client is hesitating on a proposal, you can address their unspoken fears before they even articulate them.
If psychology is the internal mechanism of understanding people, the second trait is how you project that understanding outwardly. Communication.
Communication is the lifeblood of the autonomous business. Many technical founders or creatives do not think of themselves as writers, but look at your day. Emails, proposals, Slack messages, project briefs, tweets, these written formats are your primary leadership tools.
Yeah.
Clear, effective, unambiguous communication is the mechanism by which directives are understood and trust is built at scale.
This ties perfectly back to our introverted leader. The extrovert yells across the room and causes confusion. The introverted generalist writes a
Business is fundamentally a series of educated guesses. You will inevitably make mistakes. Strategies will fail. Resilience is the intellectual acceptance that failure is a baked-in part of the process and the ability to bounce back quickly without losing your momentum. Jarvis quotes the British journalist Miles Kington here, and it perfectly encapsulates the difference between specialist data and generalist resilience.
What's the quote?
He says, "Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad."
That is brilliant. It perfectly captures it.
It really does. It illustrates that you can have all the raw specialist data in the world, but you still have to navigate unpredictable, irrational human factors. Resilience, the wisdom to adapt to reality, is far more important than having perfect, infallible textbook knowledge.
You have to be able to take a punch from reality and adjust your recipe. But to adjust effectively, you need the fourth trait, focus, which in a business context usually means the strategic art of refusal.
Focus is the defensive shield for your time. A generalist sees all the moving parts of their business and understands which levers actually drive revenue and satisfaction. Therefore, they know which opportunities are merely distractions disguised as progress. Saying a firm, polite no to bad clients or misaligned projects is the only mathematical way to leave room on your calendar for the good ones.
And finally, the fifth trait that ties the generalist stack together is decisiveness.
This is the antidote to the decision fatigue we discussed earlier. A company of one leader operates without a board of directors. They must make countless choices every single day. The key mechanism of decisiveness is not rushing blindly into choices, but breaking massive, stressful, existential decisions down into small, digestible, easily reversible micro-decisions so you can maintain forward momentum.
So the actionable takeaway here is severe but necessary. Stop proudly ignoring the parts of your business you claim you aren't naturally good at. If you ever catch yourself saying, I'm just a creative, I don't do numbers, or I'm a tech guy, I don't do people, you are actively putting your business at risk.
You're creating blind spots.
Huge ones. Dedicate intentional time to learn the basics of human psychology. Practice clear, concise writing. Learn the strategic art of refusal. Build out your generalist stack. It is the only way to maintain true autonomy. Because the moment you have to blindly outsource every single non-core task without understanding how it works, you are no longer the one in control of your destiny.
But this requirement, the mandate to master your core skill, build systems, study psychology, hone your writing, and manage your focus, leads us directly into the most dangerous psychological trap of modern entrepreneurship.
Right, because if I am suddenly responsible for mastering marketing, copywriting, and bookkeeping on top of my actual full-time job of delivering a service, doesn't that inherently force me into working 100-hour weeks? This seems like a fast track to the very hustle culture we are supposedly trying to avoid. Which brings us to the internet's absolute favorite buzzword, the hustle.
The hustle culture is the dominant religion of modern business, and it is incredibly toxic.
The narrative is everywhere. Sleep when you're dead, rise and grind. If you want to succeed as a generalist company of one, you should be grinding 24 hours a day.
Jarvis points out there are over 500,000 articles on Google alone glorifying entrepreneurial hustling. It has become a perverse cultural badge of honor to be chronically sleep-deprived, to sacrifice your personal relationships and your health for your business, and to constantly be seen grinding.
It frames basic human needs as weaknesses.
It is fundamentally incompatible with the company of one mindset. Jarvis brings up a genuinely heartbreaking example that perfectly captures the sickness of this mentality. It was from an Apple TV reality show called Planet of the Apps.
I remember that show.
A contestant on the show, an entrepreneur seeking funding, actually says on camera to the judges, "I rarely get to see my kids. That's a risk you have to take."
That is incredibly bleak. It frames sacrificing your children's childhood as a necessary, completely normalized business strategy. The implication is that if you do see your kids, you aren't dedicated enough to get the funding.
And many of the most successful, sustainable founders fiercely despise this narrative. David Heinemeier Hansson, the creator of the programming framework Ruby on Rails and a founding partner at Basecamp, coined a brilliant term for this. He calls it trickle-down workaholism. He hates the paradigm that working more hours is the only mathematical equation for success.
Because working more does not equal working better. In fact, beyond a certain point, it mathematically guarantees you will work worse.
Let's unpack the logic and the mechanics of why hustle culture destroys the solo business. The true defining value of a company, of one, the primary reason it can actually compete with massive, well-funded corporations, is agility. It is the ability to pivot instantly, to notice subtle shifts in market trends, and to creatively solve complex problems without waiting for committee approval.
Right. It's the speed and simplicity of the nimble ship navigating while the massive corporate cruise liner is slowly turning around.
But here is the mechanical failure. If you fill every single waking hour with tasks, meetings, emails, and relentless grinding execution, you completely eliminate the mental space, the slack in the system required to actually use that agility.
You're just reacting at that point.
Exactly. You are so busy working in the business, frantically pulling the levers, that you have absolutely no time to work on the business. You won't notice when a broader market strategy is failing because your head is entirely down, focused on executing the failure as fast as possible.
I think of hustle culture like redlining a car engine. If you are driving on a 2-lane highway and you need to pass a massive semi-truck, you push the gas pedal to the floor, the RPMs go into the red zone, the engine screams, you burn a lot of fuel, and you pass the truck safely. That burst of extreme output is necessary for survival in that specific moment.
Right. Sometimes you have to sprint.
But if you keep driving with the needle in the red mile after mile, day after day, because you think red means fast, your engine's going to physically melt down and explode.
That is a highly accurate mechanical analogy for human cognition. The hustle is a passing gear. It is an emergency protocol. It is not a sustainable lifestyle.
And the science backs this up with hard math, right? We have actual data on human output.
Yes, multiple studies on workplace productivity show a steep cliff in cognitive output. Our ability to focus, solve complex problems, and produce quality work drastically diminishes after about 55 hours of work a week. Anything you do after that threshold is likely resulting in severe diminishing returns.
Wait, so working 80 hours is actually hurting you?
In many cases, It results in negative returns, meaning you are making mistakes because you are exhausted, and those mistakes will take you hours to fix on Monday morning. Saying no, which we discussed as a key generalist trait, isn't just about business focus. It is a vital biological imperative to preserve your physical and mental energy.
It's about maintaining the machine. And in a company of one, you are the entire machine. If you break, the revenue goes to zero. So for everyone listening, audit your week. Look critically at your calendar and ruthlessly eliminate the tasks, the meetings, and the social media posturing that only serve to make you look busy to the outside world.
It's all just noise.
True success in the company of one model is achieving the same or significantly better results in fewer hours. It is about maximizing leverage, not maximizing effort.
But this brings us to a terrifying crossroads.
Yeah.
Let's say you master everything we've discussed. You figure out the autonomy balance, you build your generalist skills, you successfully reject the toxic hustle culture, and against all odds, your business succeeds wildly.
The dream scenario.
Right. You gain influence, you gain capital, you gain power. But if you survive the hustle and actually achieve that power, a completely new, entirely invisible biological danger emerges right inside your own brain.
This part of the book genuinely shook me. It changes how you view every successful person in the world. We are talking about the power paradox. The historian Henry Adams once famously called power a tumor that ends up killing its victim's sympathies, which sounds like a dramatic, poetic metaphor from a historian. But it turns out he was diagnosing a literal neurological condition.
It is backed by hard neuroscience. Sukhvinder Obi, a neuroscientist, and Dr. Keltner, a renowned psychology professor at Berkeley, have researched this phenomenon extensively. They define the power paradox.
What is the paradox, exactly?
The paradox is a cruel irony of human biology. The very qualities that help you gain leadership and success in the first place, traits like deep empathy, sharp self-awareness, transparency, collaborative mirroring, and gratitude, are actually physically diminished by the brain once you attain the power those traits won for you.
Wait, let's explain the mechanics of this. Are you saying that gaining power actually acts like localized brain damage to our empathy centers? How does holding a CEO title change the physical wiring of a brain?
In a functional, observable sense, yes, it mimics damage. The research looked at the mirror neuron system in the brain. This is the network responsible for feeling empathy. When you watch someone stub their toe, your brain slightly fires in a way that makes you wince. You mirror their experience. It is the biological basis of human connection.
Right.
The researchers found that as people gain power, their brains literally stop mirroring the behavior and emotions of others. They lose the ability to read subtle facial expressions accurately. They struggle to empathize with the struggles of their subordinates. They become neurologically detached from the human experience of the people around them.
That is absolutely terrifying because our entire culture of entrepreneurialism idolizes the exact opposite. We idolize the image of the indefatigable leader, the superhuman founder who carries the weight of the entire world on their shoulders, who never needs anyone's help, who is utterly self-reliant and impervious to stress. We build statues of these people.
And that mythology is incredibly dangerous because it isolates leaders precisely at the moment when their brains are biologically wired to become less empathetic and more disconnected. They are suffering a neurological deficit of connection, and the culture tells them to isolate themselves even further. Jarvis grounds this in a very real, very modern story. He shares the experience of Rand Fishkin, the founder of MOZ, a highly successful SEO and marketing data company.
Right. If you look at Fishkin by all external metrics, he was crushing it. He was the golden boy of the tech world.
He grew the company from a simple blog to a massive $48 million software business. He was hitting 100% revenue growth year after year. He was flying around the world giving keynotes. He was the poster child for startup success.
So what happened?
But internally, as he isolated himself to carry the burden of this massive growth, he fell into a deep, crippling depression. The pressure and the isolation completely broke him, and he eventually had to step down as CEO of the company he built.
Because he was trying to be that infallible, indefatigable hero that the hustle culture demands.
Yes. But through that incredibly difficult, painful experience of stepping down and recovering, Fishkin developed profound insights for debugging leadership. He figured out how to actively, structurally fight back against the neurological effects of the power paradox.
Let's share his debugging tools, because for anyone building a business, these aren't just nice tips, these are literal lifesavers. The first tool is forced self-awareness.
You cannot rely on your brain to naturally remain self-aware once you have power. You have to build strict, unbreakable routines to check in with yourself. Fishkin implemented a rule where he spent 30 minutes every single Friday with his wife purely to openly discuss his weekly stresses, his fears, and his anxieties. He forced himself to verbalize the pressure so he couldn't keep it bottled up in an echo chamber.
He externalized the pressure to maintain his humanity. The second tool is one that still carries too much stigma in the business world: therapy.
He realized that no human being is biologically equipped to carry the psychological weight of a complex company alone. He has a fantastic, highly relatable quote about this. If therapy is good enough for Tony Soprano, it's good enough for you.
I love that quote.
Seeking professional psychological help is not a weakness. It is a necessary, proactive maintenance tool for a high-performing leader's brain. You wouldn't run a server farm without IT maintenance. You shouldn't run a business without mental maintenance.
The third tool is the active practice of empathy, which, as we just learned, you have to do deliberately because your brain is trying to turn it off.
It is about actively practicing what the researcher Brené Brown calls feeling with people. When you are the boss, it is incredibly easy to view your team or your freelance contractors as just resources, as line items on a spreadsheet, or as cogs in your machine. You have to force yourself to stay intimately connected to their human experience. You have to ask them about their lives, understand their challenges, and actively listen, which loops us right back to the introverted servant leader model.
And finally, the fourth debugging tool, which might be the most surprisingly scientifically backed of all gratitude and connection.
The data on gratitude is remarkably powerful. Organizational psychologist Adam Grant found that simply taking the time to explicitly, genuinely thank contractors and employees boosts their engagement and output significantly. But Datcher Keltner's research takes it a step further into physical connection. He studied NBA basketball teams and tracked their use of physical touch, things like bear hugs, fist bumps, high fives, and back pats, which are primal expressions of appreciation and shared struggle.
Wait, you measured high fives?
He meticulously tracked them throughout the season. And the data show that the teams that touched the most, the teams that physically expressed the most shared connection and gratitude, actually won up to 2 more games per season, entirely independent of the underlying skill level or salary of the players. The physical act of connection builds profound trust, shared purpose, and resilience. It actively fights the biological isolation of power.
It is amazing that massive legacy corporations are finally waking up to this biology. Places like Google and Ford are now actively running executive training programs specifically designed to debug these leadership-induced blind spots. They are spending millions of dollars to teach empathy to executives. They recognize that power damages the very skills needed to lead.
They aren't doing it just to be nice. They are doing it because they've realized that treating leaders as infallible, isolated gods is mathematically terrible for the bottom line. It causes high turnover, stifles innovation, and leads to catastrophic executive burnout.
So the immediate practical takeaway for you, the listener, whether you run a massive team or you are a solo freelancer dealing with clients, you are a fallible, biological human being, not a superhero. Do not isolate yourself. Build strict, calendar-enforced routines to practice gratitude. Schedule regular, brutally honest check-ins with a trusted partner, a mentor, or a professional therapist. You have to proactively, aggressively maintain your self-awareness and your empathy, because the mere act of succeeding will actively try to strip those human qualities away from you.
That is the essential, non-negotiable maintenance of a company of one.
We have covered a massive, paradigm-shifting amount of ground today. Let's synthesize this and tie it all together into a cohesive philosophy. We started by completely dismantling the culturally ingrained myth of the loud, dominant, charismatic leader. We saw the data proving that quiet, focused empowerment, the model of the lighthouse rather than the firework, often yields vastly superior results, especially with highly skilled teams.
We learned that the utopian idea of pure autonomy is actually a destructive trap, and that true freedom requires the strict alignment of systems and constraints to prevent chaos and decision fatigue.
Right. We then explored the necessity of the generalist stack. Why understanding the psychology of your customer, mastering the craft of written communication, building resilience to failure, and ruthlessly focusing your energy are critical survival skills in an ambiguous world.
We forcefully rejected the toxic narrative of hustle culture, recognizing that grinding for 80 hours a week destroys the very agility and mental slack that makes a company of one successful in the first place.
And finally, we confronted the terrifying biology of the power paradox, realizing that success can quite literally rewire our brains to lose the empathy that got us there, requiring active, disciplined, scheduled routines of gratitude, therapy, and self-awareness to counteract the neurological damage of power.
When you weave all of these distinct ideas together, the true soul of this chapter emerges. True leadership in a company of one, or any modern organization, is not about aggressively expanding your dominance outward over other people.
Exactly. It is an act of rigorous, uncompromising internal curation. It is not about being the loudest voice in the boardroom, grinding the most hours until you collapse, or letting everyone run wild without rules. It is about turning your focus inward. It is about balancing your rigid systems with your creative freedom, constantly broadening your varied stack of skills, fiercely protecting your calendar from the toxic hustle, and actively guarding your human empathy and your mental health against the deeply isolating, neurologically altering effects of success. It's about having the quiet confidence to be the lighthouse.
That internal mastery is the defining difference between a traditional, stressed-out corporate boss and the resilient, sustainable leader of a company of one.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, highly provocative thought to mull over on your own. I want you to take a hard, unvarnished look at your calendar, your daily habits, and your communication style right now, today. If your business miraculously achieved every single one of its most ambitious goals, tomorrow, if you hit your ultimate target revenue, got the perfect roster of clients, and reached the absolute summit of your industry, would your current leadership habits protect your empathy and your sanity? Or would your current habits guarantee that you become an exhausted, isolated victim of the power paradox?
It is the ultimate question of whether your daily habits are truly designed to sustain the weight of your own success.
Now that you know the internal mechanics of what it takes to lead yourself and your business sustainably, join us on the next deep dive, where we will explore what happens when a business decides to do the absolute unthinkable in our modern capitalist society, growing a company that deliberately, strategically refuses to grow any larger. We will see you then.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.